We're going to call the meeting to order. It's 7 o'clock.
With that?
Yeah.
So far, so good.
Colchester Planning Commission.
Wave at me.
Okay. The committee was.
All right. First one tonight on the agenda, considerations reserved for changes to the agenda items and order. We are not making any changes. Comments and questions from the public not related to the agenda. We're all set there. And now we go for an introduction to Act 181 and the Regional Future Land Use Map. And we have staff from the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission that will walk us through it. Welcome.
Thanks for having us.
All right.
Can we do an intro, or would you like to do an intro, Dave?
Well, good evening, everybody. Getting right down to business. Thank you for that. It's great to be here with you. Thank you very much for making time for the Regional Planning Commission on your agenda. My name is Kate McCarthy. I'm a senior planner with the RPC.
Taylor Newton, I'm the planning program director at CRPC. Somebody from growing up in Colchester, professional, so nice to see you, Rebecca.
Yeah, very good.
We're really pleased to be here. So our presentation, I'm not sure if it's visible to you as planning commissioners. It is projected behind you and available to the public, but
We have a screen
They
right in
do
front
have
of
a
us.
screen.
Do you have a screen on that?
Yeah.
I see.
Whatever you see there, we see here.
Very so. We understand that you've been following Act 181 in various ways through its development and then passage. So you're starting from a pretty good place with your knowledge. Nonetheless, tonight, what we'd really like to do is follow the agenda on the next slide, please, and kind of recap Act 181. We're gonna start with a presentation recapping Act 181, talking about regional future land use mapping, Act 250, and designation programs. We're also going to talk about housing targets as it relates to Act 181. And then we'll shift gears and have a little bit of a workshop portion of the meeting. You know, a part of Act 181 that you'll hear about is public participation and making sure that we do it really thoughtfully, making sure that we reach folks who often don't participate in public processes. So I'd like to talk with you about a draft outreach plan for Colchester to inform the future regional land use map. So that'll be the second part of what we're going to talk about this evening. We'll talk a lot tonight about the regional future land use map, and then we'll come back to another meeting at your invitation to show the map and talk about that in more detail. So tonight is an overview night. We'll keep you in suspense another couple weeks before we look at the map itself, but we will look forward to coming back and talking about that as well. Are there any questions about the agenda? All right, let's dive right in, please. Next slide. So since you've been following Act 181, you may know this, but I think it's really important to point out that at a very high level, the pieces of Act 181 advance this planning goal that you see on the slide. And we've had that on the books for a number of years. There's the goal to maintain Vermont's historic settlement pattern of compact village and urban centers separated by rural countryside. Sometimes we call this smart growth. The Act 181 changes are in service of this goal and have outcomes, or an aim to have outcomes including promoting diverse housing options, streamlining permitting, using infrastructure in our communities more efficiently, and protecting natural resources. So that's kind of the why of Act 181. We've got some goals to meet as a state, and this helps us to do it. Next slide, please. So to accomplish this, Act 181 provides some updates to how we do land use planning, regional planning, and mapping in Vermont. And then once we do that, once we create those maps in a new way, two things are possible. One, we're going to modernize how we create state designations. You may have heard of village centers, downtown centers. You have a growth center in Colchester. Those will all be mapped through the future land use mapping process now. The changes to planning and mapping are also going to speed up the transition of Act 250 from its current approach, where projects go into Act 250 based on how big the projects are. Now, projects will be subject to Act 250 based on where they're located. These changes are really meant to recognize that some areas of Vermont are ready and suitable for growth. and to incentivize growth in those areas. We're working with a lot of different towns. We're throughout Chittenden County, 19 entities, and there's a great range. So we really understand that what it means to be ready for growth and what growth looks like in different communities is going to look different. And that's part of the conversation we'll be having. Next slide, please. So this slide goes into a little bit more detail about, I've mentioned changes to planning. What are we talking about here? So one of the changes is that we must incorporate meaningful participation as defined by a different bill, the Environmental Justice Law, Act 154. The outreach plan that we create together is going to help support that meaningful participation. Through the goals in statute and through the purposes of local and regional plans, we've got more focus on environmental justice, which is to make sure that the benefits and the burdens of different land use decisions don't disproportionately impact certain groups. We're going to talk more about climate resilience, more about housing in areas planned for growth. These are purposes that really help us meet the moment and some of the challenges we face as a state and then as regions and as municipalities. Within the regional plan elements, or the chapters of a regional plan, there's a new requirement to standardize how future land use mapping is done. So we've got new categories for mapping that we'll talk a lot about later. And then within the local and regional planning goals, we will be focusing on accommodating a substantial majority of the housing needed to reach housing targets and being thoughtful about where in our communities that can happen.
Okay, can I stop right there real quick? Just want to stress that we're showing all the regional planning commissions on this slide because we're all doing the mapping right now, all 11 of us. And as Kate mentioned, we have to do it in a standardized way now. Whereas in the past, we all did our own regional future land use mapping in our own unique way. And so a lot of the past 6 to 8 months has been working with our RPC partners to develop guidance on how we're going to have some consistency about how we're going to map the 11 categories Kate's going to talk about.
Great, thank you, Taylor. All right, next slide, please. So I do want to point out that creating a regional future land use map is not a new concept. You may recognize the map on this slide from our regional plan. This is one we developed in 2018?
2018 really with the roots in 2013.
2018 with roots in 2013. Building from what we knew from our municipalities' zoning. So we've done this before. It's a way to describe what we have in our region. It's a way to show what interconnections look like. It's a way to show the different centers of gravity for housing, for economic development, for transportation that exist in our region, and think about it as a whole. So this is not a new concept. What is different is the required land use categories that we will now have to use, and what the future land use map is used for, the designations and potential Act 250 exemptions. So that the map isn't new, but the way it's used is. Okay. Next slide, please. All right. So to get into the details a little bit more, I've mentioned the new land use categories, and this is a slide, a graphic, that shows across the top what those 11 future land use categories are. And then it shows how they relate to the state designation programs, where you can get incentives for development, and to Act 250 regulatory relief. So let me just walk across the top of the slide and tell you a little bit about these categories. I'm happy to answer questions, because this is a good amount of information. But I see some of you have printed out the handout, you've been studying it, so excellent. So reading across the top from left to right, you see first we have the categories of town centers and village centers. And those are core areas, compact centers where we might have a mix of residential, commercial, services, civic uses. They mimic our historic downtowns and villages. These centers also include our new town centers and our growth areas. They're the cores around which things are built. Next, we have the planned growth areas and the village areas. The pinks are getting lighter, and those two areas represent neighborhoods. Those are development that largely residential, but might have a mix of uses around the downtown or the village centers. The next category is kind of an orange there. It's called transitional or transition. And this is a land use category to describe places where there might currently be some commercial, maybe some residential, maybe some really large lot development or space for more development. It's a place that's working the way it is, but can become something else as well with a little bit of planning. And this designation recognizes that with additional planning, these could become even more a part of the community, or provide more community services, including housing. Enterprise areas are places like quarries and industrial areas, to recognize that there are certain uses that need to take place separate from our areas of planned growth. The next category is resource-based recreation. This includes your larger scale ski areas. So we have Bolton Valley in Chittenden County. Up in the Kingdom, they have Kingdom Trails. So these are larger scale with some infrastructure associated with it, based on the land. And then to the far right, you can see we have some different categories of rural. We have the hamlet category, and I will give away that I don't think we have any hamlets in Colchester.
No,
I don't think you'll see any hamlets in Colchester, though that could be part of the discussion.
at least so far.
There may be one we miss. That's kind of a crossroads. It's a place that may not have a whole lot of infrastructure, a whole lot of development, but people know it as a place. So Hanksville in Huntington, Jonesville in Richmond. Thank you. They're places we know. So then the other three rural categories, we have rural conservation, and that is a category where we delineate natural resources of regional importance. Those that cross between town lines. It includes things like forests, river corridors.
Larger wetlands complexes, usually over 5 acres.
Yeah, larger wetlands complexes over 5 acres. Some of those regionally important natural resources. We also have a rural category that lays out agriculture and forest land. And also then a rural general category, which describes a lot of the land in our region. It's kind of rural residential, still has some working lands functions, still has some habitat value, kind of a broader swath. One of the things we continue to learn and like to talk about as we do this mapping is we know that rural is many things. And we know that forested land, agriculture, farmed land has natural resource habitat, climate mitigation, like all the good values. And so there's overlap between these categories, and we're doing the best we can to lay them out.
Just so I understand, these will be like an overlay over what we have now?
So the way this will work is that this will be a map in the regional plan that is used for these two purposes, the state designations in Act 250. It does not require you to change your zoning to be in alignment with it. We hope that when we create this map, it can be in conversation with Colchester's future land use map and provide some source of help. It's another way to look at the resources in your community and consider how you might want to plug into the regional scale. I don't know if Taylor has anything to add there.
I mean, just those top categories, those are categories we have to use in the new regional future land use map. That replaces what we currently have. And so the only thing that could be perceived as an overlay on that regional future land use map here is Tier 3, which we'll talk about in a second, which the rulemaking separate from this regional process. But yeah, these are really your base districts on top. Your 11 different categories of base districts.
Yeah, and you are not required to use these categories in your municipal future land use map. If you liked them and you wanted to, you would not be prevented from doing that.
Go ahead, jump right in.
I'm sorry, I just had to leave for a minute, but I was wondering about the resource-based recreation, if you had covered that. I'm sorry to ask you.
Sure, no, I'm happy to share about that.
Yeah.
So that is for somewhat larger scale activities that take place on the land and have some infrastructure associated with them, recreation. So Bolton Valley in our region, Kingdom Trails up in the Northeast Kingdom, it's a big trail network across a number of different pieces of land, has some huts, parking, food, things like that. I wonder if maybe the Craftsbury Outdoor Center up in Craftsbury would fall into that category to have lodging.
I'm happy to read the one-sentence description in statute if you'd like to hear
It's
it.
only one sentence.
It's only one sentence. These areas include large-scale, resource-based recreational facilities, often concentrated around ski resorts, lake shores, or concentrated trail networks that may provide infrastructure, jobs, or housing to support recreational activities.
Thank you.
And I'll just elaborate on that a little bit. The definition, these definitions came to us in the bill in Act 181. They're now part of statute that governs land use planning, and so that's what the code is. Okay. Other questions about these categories?
Not really. We pretty much have all that we've worked on over the years, so it's basically a same idea, same deal, right?
Yeah.
The reason I asked for the overlay is because as years have gone by, we go to your board with what we have, you overlook the whole thing, you look at all the other towns around us, and then we all kind of meld together. So, we're on the same page on that, right?
Yeah, great. All right, well, let me continue on through this slide then. So we talked about the regional future land use categories. Downtown centers and village centers, once they're mapped on our regional future land use map, are going to become designated centers for the purposes of the state designation program and state incentives. So Severance Corners is going to be, we're not going to have downtown village center, Newtown center, neighborhood development area, growth center. We're going to have centers, and we're going to have neighborhoods. So Severance Corners will become a center and be able to access benefits from the state designation program that way, once the map's approved. Planned growth areas and village areas will become neighborhoods. And that's another category of state incentives that can be accessed to help shape growth and development.
The one thing I'll say about centers that we won't go into detail tonight about is that the center designation has 3 different levels within it to kind of mirror the historic designations. So level 1 is really what would be now the village center designation. Level 2 is like we've done some capital planning, we have zoning in place. That's not exactly equivalent to a Newtown center, but almost kind of sort of there. Step 3 is more of a existing downtown designation, like downtown Burlington has, downtown Winooski has. You have downtown organization that does events, does community engagement, those sorts of things. And so the idea here with center is that it's going to encapsulate everything from, in Chittenden County, Huntington Center to downtown Burlington, all within that range of these 3 levels of center.
So that's a little bit about how these land use categories translate into the state designation program. The land use categories also connect to Act 250. Downtown centers, I mentioned earlier that today Act 250 reviews projects based on how big a project is. Is it over 10 acres? Is it under 20 units? In the future, projects will be reviewed starting with where they're located. And in areas planned for growth, there'll be less Act 250 because that's where we want to see development. In areas that are highly sensitive to development, there may be increased Act 250. That's tier 3, and that's something that has not been defined yet. It's being figured out through rulemaking at the legislature. But let me talk a little bit about tier 1. Downtown centers, village centers, planned growth areas, and village areas can all be eligible for partial exemption through what's called tier 1B. That means 50 units or less of housing. Doesn't have to go through Act 250 if it's in one of those areas. That's because the town has done, the municipality has done the planning. And there's no need to overlay Act 250 on that. Tier 1A is a little tighter. It's a full exemption from Act 250 for residential
Hold on a
and
minute.
commercial.
Do you mean over 50?
I
He's-
mean, under 50 are exempted from Act 250.
Okay.
Bigger projects in Tier 1B areas would still go through Act 250.
Okay.
And to be clear too, like, we talk about active exemption of tier 1B, we mean projects of 50 units or fewer.
Okay.
And so if that project involves subdivision of 10 or more lots, regardless of number of units, that's still going to trigger Act 250 jurisdiction.
Okay.
So it's just about units is that partial exemption. It's not about subdivision of lots.
Okay.
For full exemption, a municipality can apply for Tier 1A, That is something you can do if you have a center or a planned growth area. It's not something that a village area is eligible for. So for both Tier 1A and Tier 1B, a town opts into that. It is not something that once it's on the map, you have to be exempt from Act 250. That's a decision-making process that's made at the local level as you decide if you have local capacity, if your regulations are in a place where they can stand in for the review that Act 250 would have provided for larger projects. So Tier 1A and Tier 1B are things that you opt into or apply for. We'll go into that a little more.
Yeah, I think the big takeaway that, should be that at the end of this process, we're going to go through the vacation process in Colchester to develop a map. We're going to go to your select board and say, here's the draft map. Within the centers, planned growth areas, and village areas, what areas would you like to be included as Tier 1B? It doesn't have to be all of the centers, all the planned growth areas, or all the village areas, parts of it. But we'll need an indication or a vote of your select board to say, we're opting in a Tier 1B. Here are the geographic areas we want included as Tier 1. And then, provided our regional plan is approved in June 2026, so July 2026, by the new land use review board, Colchester on its own could decide to apply to that same board for Tier 1A exemption. There's a lot of criteria that go along with Tier 1A we won't go into tonight, but it is an option for a municipality if you are Tier 1B.
And we will recap this again as the presentation goes, so that was the warm-up. Next slide, please. Taylor mentioned an approval process for regional plans. Because the regional future land use maps are being used for different purposes than they have in the past, there is a different approval process for regional plans and their associated maps. They're going to be approved by the newly formed, as of 8 days ago, Land Use Review Board. You may have heard of the Natural Resources Board, which administers Act 250. This replaces the Natural Resources Board. So once the regional plans mapped and plan are approved by the Land Use Review Board, you've got that automatic state designation for the centers and the neighborhoods, and you can opt in to have Act 250 exemptions in eligible areas. Next slide, please. All right, let's talk a little bit more about Act 250. So you may have already heard that there are interim Act 250 exemptions in place, and the legislature put these into place to give the regional planning commission some time to do its work, to work with municipalities and develop those future land use maps. The interim exemptions support housing development in the meantime. And on this slide, as you can see, those exemptions are either location-based or type-based. So relevant to Colchester, within new town centers, growth centers, and neighborhood development areas, developments of 75 units or fewer are exempt from Act 250. Those are areas planned for growth, you've done the work, you have the infrastructure, you have the capability as a town to review those things. So that's the exemption that is currently in place. And you can see that there are others for downtowns and village centers and transit corridors. Colchester does also have a transit corridor, north and south
On
of
7,
corners,
correct, yeah.
where within a quarter mile of that, there is an exemption for projects of 50 units or fewer from Act 250. Still goes through a local process. There are also type-based exemptions, so if there's a commercial project that's converted to 29 units or fewer of housing, if there's a hotel or a motel converted to affordable housing, any number of units is exempt, and accessory dwelling units remain exempt from Act 250. So really, I described the new town center, growth center exemption, I described the transit corridor exemption. These exemptions are already in place. So this opt-in process for Tier 1B is a matter of deciding as a community whether you want to keep those exemptions in place for the new town center, not the transit corridor, but yeah.
For the new town center, are theoretically other centers that may exist in Colchester.
Right.
We may map additional centers in Colchester as a part of this process.
Great. All right, next slide, please. If you'd like to learn more about the interim Act 250 exemptions, there are some good resources. There's a guidance sheet on the Land Use Review Board's website. There's a handy mapping tool where you can look at your community or your property and sort of see whether it's within that exemption area. And your district coordinator is also a resource if you have questions about this interim exemption.
Can this presentation be put on the planning office's website?
The slides? Yeah, sure.
Would that be okay? Okay, great.
Bring a lot here. We hope you'll look at it again. Hope you liked it. All right, so, next slide, please. Those interim Act 250 exemptions get us started, but let's talk a little bit. I want to recap the tiers again and just make sure that we have this laid out. Do you want to add anything?
No, sorry.
All right, so
Number cold, Kate.
there goes our. So again, there will be 3 tiers of jurisdiction for Act 250 as we move toward the fancy word for it is location-based jurisdiction or locational jurisdiction for Act 250 as opposed to the size of the project. So we talked about the tier. Tier 1, compact areas planned for growth. Tier 1B is something you can opt into. You apply to you let the RPC know, the select board lets the RPC know. Tier 1A is something that you can apply for to the Land Use Review Board after January of next year. And that is full exemption in areas where a certain amount of planning and certain requirements are in place. Those include water and sewer, water and soils and sewer or soils suitable for wastewater disposal, for 1A.
Yeah, other 1A requirements are 4 stories or more have to be allowed in that area. You do have to take on some of the things that Act 250 regulates, such as river and endangered species. I think I want to look at the full set of rules. I think one of the bigger things you need to think about with Tier 1A too is the municipality has to commit to essentially taking on the conditions of existing Act 250 permits. And so you have a lot of Act 250 permits that have been issued in Colchester over the past 50 years. And so whenever that land is subject to an existing permit, goes to the DRB for its next approval. DRB has to review the existing conditions of that Act 250 permit, see which ones still are applicable or not. And if they are applicable, a town takes on those conditions via a DRB decision. So it's a lot of responsibility and not to be taken lightly. And I think Colchester is one of those towns where we'll probably have a lot of conversation about Tier 1A and if we're ready or not. We're finding, having these conversations that only a few municipalities are feeling very ready to do this. Near Burlington's, near South Burlington's, but for the rest of the municipalities in the county, we're having, more looks like that. We're like, well, are we sure? Are we ready? Or I'm not sure.
And those are the questions to ask ourselves. Good, so that's Tier 1. Next, I'll just talk about Tier 3. I'll jump over to Tier 3 again. So this is expanded jurisdiction to be determined through rulemaking and a stakeholder process. The purpose of Tier 3 is to make sure that natural resources of state and regional importance remain intact and unfragmented. And then everything in between is going to be Tier 2, which is essentially the status quo, with the exception of there will be a road rule entered, so that even if you're in a Tier 2 area, if you build a really long road, it will trigger Act 250 jurisdiction. The purpose of that is to reduce resource fragmentation.
I think the vast majority of Chittenden County, probably the vast majority maybe the vast majority, we'll find out. Vast majority of Chittenden County will be Tier 2. It'll be status quo. Nothing really will change. It's really going to be those urban areas and those fringe areas where we're going to have a conversation about is this area appropriate for growth or not, where we'll be talking about Tier 1.
And I should add that we've talked a lot about how the regional future land use mapping process helps us identify areas appropriate for Tier 1A and Tier 1B. The regional future land use mapping process is not identifying Tier 3 areas. That's done through separate methods.
And rulemaking for that, if you're interested, I think it's supposed to start this year. The State Land Use Review Board is starting rulemaking. We know there's also a theoretical bill that may happen. They may kick it to a study instead of rulemaking this next year, so we'll see how that all plays out in the legislature. But I think the next slide maybe has the deadline of when that rulemaking should be done by.
So hang on a minute. we know tier 3 is not ready to go, so is tier 1 ready to go,
Tier 1's ready to go based on our mapping that we're going to do, yes.
based on the mapping?
Yeah, we've got control over Tier 1 and Tier 2.
The bonuses for this, for municipalities to take over small projects, still having to do all the Act 250 work is, what? What's the bonus on that for a small municipality? They're doing a
Tier
small,
1A.
yeah, tier 1A.
Yeah, so in exchange for taking on all review for, even for larger projects, and taking on the conditions of pre-existing Act 250 permits, in exchange for that, your town then, in that area, has one less layer of permitting. Someone who comes and wants to develop in Colchester goes through the local process, but they don't have to go through the state process. They do still need to go through state wastewater, wetlands, and access permits, all those permits, so it's not all on your shoulders. But Act 250 is no longer a permit they would need to get.
And then they jump from us to you for final, is that how it's
We don't
set?
have any jurisdiction in the review process for projects itself. The only jurisdiction we have is in mapping these areas
Okay,
and kind of setting up, we map the areas, you opt in Tier 1B, and then Tier 1B areas are eligible for Tier 1A if the municipality wants to pursue.
okay. That'll be fun. Yeah, all right,
All right?
I got it.
One of the things I usually say at the beginning of this presentation is that this is the first time talking about this,
Yeah.
but it will not be our last. So as you absorb this and think of other questions, please ask them. If you have the same question again, please ask it again. We're more than happy to do a better job and keep orienting all of us to this pretty significant change in the way that we do and use future land use maps.
Well, is this going to be increasing staff requirements for our planning and zoning?
If the municipality opts into Tier 1A or 1B, it would require looking at the zoning and making sure that it reviews all the things you need it to review in the absence of Act 250. So that could be an additional staff task. For Tier 1A, it could be additional work, taking on the permit conditions of existing Act 250 permits.
I agree with that with Tier 1A. I think Tier 1B is, it shouldn't be a bigger administrative burden for staff, but I'm going to look at Kathy and tell me yes or no. But I think Tier 1B is, not an additional burden. I think Tier 1A definitely is, because you're going to have to adopt additional rules as a municipality, and staff and the DRB are going to have to institute those rules.
And that question's going to have different answers, depending on the scale of a community.
Yeah.
There might be a town that says that if they have to have sole responsibility for reviewing a 40-unit housing development, that would represent a significant increase
Sure.
in what they have to do. Not so much for Colchester, I don't think.
So if the town doesn't opt for Tier 1A, then it would go to the Land Review Board, Land Use Review Board, or?
The Land Use Review Board also does not review permits. If you don't have Tier 1A and you have a big Act 250 project over 50 units, or a commercial project, it would go through the existing
Act 250.
Act 250 process, which is through the district commissions.
Okay.
Act 250 has
I guess-
50 votes on it.
I thought Act 250 was going away, that's why I was confused about it. So
Okay.
it's staying around.
Act 250, the program, is remaining.
Okay.
The way that it's administered is changing a little bit with the switch from the Natural Resources Board to the Land Use Review Board. And then those seven, the district commissions that are located regionally throughout the state. Nine. Thank
Wow.
you. Fun fact. Those remain in place. They still have the volunteer appointed district commissioners who work from the area and review the projects. Thank you for that clarification. Act 250, the law is not going away. The way that it's applied is shifting.
Taylor, do you know if the priority housing exemption will go away? Last I knew, they didn't give guidance on that.
I don't think it goes away, but I'm going to double check and email you tomorrow because I don't know off the top of my head.
I think somebody had asked Alex Farrell about it he wasn't sure.
And I'm gonna give you two answers probably. I'm gonna give you, what does Act 181 say? And then I'll give you what does the new housing bill say?
I don't think 181 addressed it.
Okay.
It might have been silent on it because if there is an Act 250 exemption, say for, 50 units or fewer, it doesn't matter what type of housing project it is, but then for above that, yeah.
So the reason that I do reference that, so just so you know where we are right now in Colchester, the existing lands in Colchester, I believe that only the area within our growth center would even qualify for a Tier 1A exemption because of the sewer and water requirement. They are the only lands that would probably meet that. All the development that has occurred there to date, with the exception of the very early units at the Severance Corners Village Center quadrant, have bypassed most of Act 250 because they have a priority housing project element, which means that they provide an affordable housing element in the simplest terms. And so they have not had to meet some of the most onerous pieces of Act 250, especially prime ag mitigation and some of the traffic requirements and mitigation requirements, the costliest pieces. And so, weighing the benefits of that for that particular area, if the priority housing exemption remains, is probably different in Colchester versus a lot of other areas, at least as far as a Tier 1A exemption goes, because of that sewer requirement. Because no other area would probably qualify today.
Yeah, again, the only reference I see to priority housing projects in Act 181, just on a quick scan, is about the interim exemptions. And so it tells me that the exemptions that exist for priority housing projects would continue
Yeah.
in the future, but I'll confirm and take a deeper look tomorrow.
That's what I think, but I haven't heard anyone actually
Say that out loud.
say that with any authority.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I think that that would be part of the conversation that the decision makers
Mhm.
would consider, at least as far as Tier 1A goes. When you ask what are the benefits. But that there are existing Act 250 permits because some of those, some permits have been issued to that area. They were just small. But there are some in our growth center area, Seventh Corners Growth Center. So there would be a burden there. Beautiful.
Okay.
Well, we've got a few more slides before we can take more questions and then shift to the outreach plan. We were talking a little bit about timeline on the next slide, please. This has a lot of text on it, something you can sort of keep for reference, but just kind of summarizes where we've been and where we're headed. This is a multi-year process because this is a new approach. So here we are in 2025, and what can, for municipalities in 2025, what you can do is, if you wish, you can apply for new designations and boundary changes to the existing designations by October. If you want to keep following the existing process through the Department of Housing and Community Development to get downtown village centers, growth centers. Maybe this is something you're contemplating, but your other option for creating a center is just to wait until the regional future land use map gets adopted. But it's an option. In 2025, it's not on this slide, but you'll also be considering whether to opt into Tier 1B. At the Regional Planning Commission in 2025, we are updating the regional plan. We are updating our regional future land use map. We're talking with our towns. In 2026 is when towns can apply to the Land Use Review Board for the Tier 1A exemption. Again, that's optional. In 2027, the temporary Act 250 exemptions expire on January 1st. And in 2026, we'll be working to have our updated plan and map adopted at the Land Use Review Board.
Yeah, we put a deadline to get our regional plan to the land use review board by the end of 2026. You know, right now, CCRPC is hoping to regionally adopt, our board adopt our new regional plan with our new regional future land use map in June 2026. It's after June 2026, then we'll go to that land use review board for their approval.
Where do we fit in on that?
Where do you fit into that? Rich, where you fit into that is, let's back up to 2025. You fit in with that in that between now and about June, we'd like to work with you guys to develop the original future land use map for Colchester. At the end of that process, you fit into that because we're going to ask you what lands in Colchester should be Tier 1B, if you want them. Then, it's really on us, the Regional Planning Commission, to get that plan approved. It's going to take us about 9 months of public hearing process per the new way statute reads. And then, yeah, you guys are really in a holding pattern until we get the regional plan approved and we go to the land use review board. So a lot of what we need from you, how we want to work with you, is going to happen here in 2025.
Okay.
If you want to pursue Tier 1A, that would happen after our plan is approved by the land use review board in late 2026 at the earliest.
Right.
So you got time to figure out if you want to give Kathy any more work or not. Now, mid-2026.
Or more staff.
Or more staff.
All right. Well, thank you for all the questions as we've gone through this. And again, keep jotting them down. We'll keep talking. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Taylor.
Oh, housing
To talk
targets.
about housing targets.
Just focus on the pink here. Don't worry about the whole statutory reference. But going back to the Home Act, not Act 181, the Home Act 2 years ago. That act says that the regional planning commissions will have a regional housing target set by Agency of Commerce and Community Development. And then from there, the regional planning commissions disaggregate that regional housing target to municipal housing targets. CCRPC just received our regional housing target about 2 weeks ago. The state gave us a range. They gave us a target for 2030 and for 2050. The range is very, very broad. I'm going to try to go off the top of my head, which is always dangerous. But let's focus on 2050. The 2050 target, I believe, was between the low end was 17,000 and the high end was 47,000. And so we'll probably do some calculating on both ends of that range, and we'll do a mid, which is about 31,000 new units in Chittenden County by 2050.
So that's for Chittenden County.
That's just Chittenden
Oh,
County.
okay.
That's not the state,
I
yeah.
thought it was Colchester.
No, no. That's Chittenden County.
Okay.
I'd say, I'd guesstimate that Chittenden County's probably got about a quarter of the statewide target. I'd have to go look at the numbers and do some percentages, but it's about what we were given. That generally tracks with how much of that statewide housing stock we have now. So those numbers aren't a surprise. The high end's a little higher than we were thinking. Let's go to the next slide. So, to prepare for the housing target, we decided to work with our Planning Advisory Committee, which is a committee that's composed of all the planning directors in Chittenden County, planning commission chairs in smaller municipalities. We decided to work with them, and specifically a subcommittee of 5 folks, to work on a methodology on how to disaggregate that regional target to the municipal level. And so Kathy Ann's one of the five that volunteered to help us with that process.
Thank you.
And so that group met probably 4 or 5 times a year ago, back in early 2024, to look at a bunch of data, really. We looked at, how much housing stock is located in each municipality as it currently exists. We looked at water and wastewater capacity. We looked at zoning build-out, roughly. How many units does zoning already allow in all our municipalities? We looked at zoning considering natural resource constraints. tried to smash a bunch of numbers together to figure out if we could figure out a methodology. This is meant as a kindly jab, but in a lot of the ways we were thinking about doing the method, Colchester broke the model because you're a pretty unique municipality. You're pretty decentralized. And so when we were looking at infrastructure, we were looking at land area, we would run a scenario and the targets all look pretty good except for Colchester. You were an outlier either very low or very high. And so at the end, not just because of Colchester, because of other municipalities too, we decided to simplify. And so I will try to very, very briefly talk about what we preliminarily decided on as a methodology and talk about how we're going to finalize that in a couple months. So what this subcommittee eventually decided upon is to divide our municipalities into 3 different categories. Our rurals, our urbans, and our municipalities that are a mix of urban and rural. Our urbans are Burlington, Winooski, Essex Junction. I'm on with the whole list. Colchester falls in the mix of urban and rural bucket. You've got some infrastructure, but you have rural parts of your community as well. That's the most complicated, bucket that we need to figure out. The urbans and rural, we decided with the urbans, right now the urbans comprise about 30% of the housing stock in Chittenden County. And so we decided in 2050, we're going to give the urbans 30% of the target. Let's just keep it simple. And we'll divide, amongst the urbans that 30% based on land area. Burlington's got more room than Winooski and Essex Junction. With the rurals, we decided, let's look at how much of the existing housing stock is in that community, and we'll set a target that essentially halves their percentage of the countywide stock in 2050. So this is not super accurate, but Charlotte right now is about 2% of the countywide housing stock in 2025. And so what we're going to say is that by 2050, Charlotte will only compose about 1% of the countywide housing stock. And so this is really to reflect that our rural municipalities don't have infrastructure. They're primarily planning on preserving lands for working lands, for forestry, for ag, those sorts of things. And we really want to use the housing targets as an opportunity to work with those municipalities to talk about infrastructure, to talk about having housing growth in the villages. But we're setting a lower target for the rurals. For the mix of urban and rurals, we're going to base the target on the mapping work that we're going to do. And we're essentially going to do the mapping work and then provide some weighting within the mapping and set higher targets for areas that have water and sewer. And so, Colchester's in the same bucket as Williston, Shelburne, South Burlington, Richmond, Heinsberg, Milton, Essex Town. And so, we expect that those municipalities will absorb about 65% of that target in 2050. But that'll be, it'll be very much based on how much area in those municipalities has infrastructure and what areas are planned for growth within those municipalities. Colchester's very big. You have a lot of rural area. And so out of that list of municipalities, I expect you'll be right there in the middle.
We're unique. See, down one corner of us is like Charlotte,
Yes.
dramatically. And then we have, of course, a little urban, a little suburban.
Yeah.
So
You're
you're right, our
everything.
numbers, I'd be surprised if our numbers would come up higher. We're pretty unique in how spread out we are, you're absolutely right, but we also have a lot of rural.
Got a lot of rural.
We have a lot of land, but a lot of rural,
A lot of rural.
that we don't want to disturb those communities. Where do we come in, again, this board, when it comes to the numbers
Mhm.
of what our guesstimate is?
I mean,
Because we are very focused on
mhm.
our own community, and our growth has been pretty much in line with what people want.
Mhm.
And I wouldn't want to come up with a new master plan, which are coming up and saying, oh man, we're going to put on another, whatever, 10,000 units here. And people say, oh, right, you're out of control, right?
Here's what I can tell you. When we worked through this methodology in the spring, looking to Kathy Ann for support. When we worked through this methodology in the spring, we tested a 25,000 new unit target. And
For the region.
for the region. not for
Yeah,
Colchester.
yeah, really
For the
clarify that.
25,000 units in the region in 2050, not just for Colchester.
Okay.
And we did that. I don't remember what the exact number was for Colchester, but we looked at the target, and we looked at essentially your annualized growth rate between 2000 and 2022. Because we have a pretty good idea about how many housing units were built in Colchester in that period. That 25,000 number was a little bit higher than your historic growth pattern, but not a ton. We're not talking hundreds. We're talking like 10, 15. That said, we got a higher target than that 25,000. And so, before I directly answer your question, what I'll say is that moving forward, what we're going to do is we're going to reassemble this same group of 5 people, look at these new numbers, run the numbers, and talk about ways we may want to adjust this methodology to right-size it. And so we want to make sure PAC and the planning directors are feeling comfortable because they hear from you. And so we're hoping to do that over the next couple months. At the same time, we'll be drafting this map, right? We're trying to decide, probably with PAC's guidance, if we release preliminary targets based on a draft map, or if we just hold off on releasing any targets until we have a final map. We're going to talk about it. I have no decision for you yet. But in terms of how you weigh in, I think, indirectly, definitely in terms of, our discussion about the map and what areas are appropriate to be planned for growth. I think through, your representative who will be on the tax subcommittee, helping us decide what this methodology is probably the most efficient way to influence the number. And, all I ask is that, you try to remember that we have to do this for the whole region. And we're trying to do it fairly and not overburden any individual municipality. And that with 47,000, we're going to give you ranges. We're going to give you the 17 and what that looks like for Colchester. We're going to give you the 41. And the 41 is going to be a reach for everyone. It's going to be hard for everyone to meet that target, I think. So I think it's about, when you guys go to write your town plan next time around. I'm not sure when you're out.
2027,
You
so
got
it's
some
pretty
time.
soon.
You're going to have to include those targets in that plan.
You say
No.
we got time.
That's not a lot of time.
You must
You're
not have
right.
written a plan.
I haven't been doing it in a while. I've been writing a regional plan for about 4 years at this point. Yeah, never ends.
That's like tomorrow, Taylor, that's tomorrow.
I know. We've been about to adopt this thing a couple times, and then statute changes, and then we delay. So we're in year 4. So I'm ready to do that.
Can I just ask, exit 17, are those soils suitable for housing
Suitable for a sewer pipe.
and then housing?
If you have a sewer pipe, you can do a lot,
Yeah.
but nothing
Uh-huh.
else.
But in the sewer, there's the problem.
Yeah,
You're going to be fighting a big group. We already went down the road once.
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
Okay.
good time to just share a few thoughts.
What's that?
Is it a good time to share a few thoughts?
Yeah, just talk up, Kathy, and if you
Oh, I'm
could,
sorry.
please. It's okay. You're so,
Sorry, is that better? No? Okay.
talk right into the mic or whatever. Is it on?
I think so.
Okay.
Okay, so just a few thoughts, and everything Taylor has shared with you is true. We did work on this, quite a bit last year with a small group of us, and it's a lot of sausage making, right? I mean, it's like, how do we do this? How do we do this with so many desperately different towns? Because there is a lot of variety even in Chittenden County. People think Chittenden County is just one big place when you're talking about state, and we are so different. Even within one town, we can be so different. And we tried on a lot of different. We had 5 or 6 different lenses, we called them at one point, and he's right. Colchester broke it a couple times. But keeping that in mind, I mean, there's a reason that happens, and I think to some extent you're going to see some other towns that sort of break it. I mean, I think Shelburne is not that different either, especially with sort of their newer approaches to building and housing and development. And part of it is that we're very limited in where our infrastructure is, and we don't know where infrastructure will be. But it is sort of reality that we can't ignore. And that is something that, you know, I feel like I walked around every one of those meetings with a giant asterisk. Because ultimately, the idea of separating these into different buckets, you know, was one that I did think was a good one, but it was with a giant caveat of, this is going to make this map so critical. And I was not going to give any sort of endorsement until I saw the map, because the existing map, I'm not a big fan of the existing map. I've shared that. I don't think it's very accurate. The future land use map, the regional future land use map for Colchester at least, has problems. I said, we use this map, there's going to be a big problem. And I think everybody was okay with that. We agreed. But we're going to be making a new one, so it was okay. And so this map is going to be critically important. And so I would urge all of us to take our time, if this is going to be the lens that we continue with. And I haven't heard anything that says that'll change. Maybe it will. But if this connection is going to remain in place, then this map becomes critical for more reasons for Colchester than just the ones that we started this meeting with. And because it is about right-sizing the numbers. And right-sizing the numbers is good for everyone. It's not just about, it's also about making sure that we're doing our best to be successful, and not sitting around in 2030 saying, boy, we fell really short, which I am an optimist, I really am. However, these housing targets are aggressive, and that's not the RPC's fault, they didn't pick them. Just to put it in perspective, because I did do the math, the annual housing growth, Taylor shared with you the 2050 goals. 2030 goals have less of a range because it's a shorter time frame. But even the low end of that range between now and 2030 almost doubles the highest growth year in Chittenden County ever. That's the low range. So they're looking at 7,000 units a year in Chittenden County, which has never produced, ever, more than 4,700, I think is the number.
7,000, there's a low and high end for 2030, so 7,000 total for 2030.
7,000,
Yeah.
And that increase of 7,000? Or
Correct.
bringing the total number of units in the county,
No,
a net increase?
correct. So the 2030, sorry, give me a second.
but the numbers in the report do give the annual, and the annual targets exceed the highest housing targets. So they're aggressive, and I think that they admit that, and that's okay. We just have to be aware that they're doing that, and when you know that you're doing that.
Yeah, 2030 targets, like, I'm focusing on 2050 because the 2030 targets,
Tomorrow.
that housing
As I
has
said,
to be in the
it's
pipeline
tomorrow.
now in order to even be possible for
Yeah.
2030.
Yeah.
And I think there's going to be, we'll disaggregate the target for 2030 because we have to.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's going to mean that much. And, to the extent it means anything, it's going to show that I read the numbers for Burlington earlier. 2030 looks fine, actually. And just know what we know is in the pipeline. Looking at the Allenworths and Miners. But for a town like Colchester, it might not. So.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
look at
I don't know, I haven't seen the numbers, so I can't say. But if those numbers are dependent on a map, then it is, again, I think it just makes it more critical to have a critical eye to the map and to talk about, what is realistic, and we talk, it's a balance between, we can't ignore the fact that the F in the future land use map is future, so it's not like what does it exist today. So you're balancing when you look at this, how do we see things in the future? Where do we want it to be? How do we believe that it can be, but tempering that with, what is the realistic timeline for the improvements that are needed to make those things happen? And the infrastructure needs, Colchester is this mix, and And a large part of that is because, and I was slow to learn this, I have to admit it. I worked in South Burlington for so long. I never discussed wastewater. It was just not a word we used. We didn't have to. Because you could dream big. Sewer was everywhere.
Yeah.
Despite what their sewer service map shows. Don't listen to them.
They changed it.
Did they?
Yeah.
Okay. You could put, if you had the political will, 100 units of density on every acre, everywhere. That is physically impossible in Colchester, in probably 85% of the land area. Physically impossible to have probably even 4 units per acre because of the sewer and soil restrictions. And so we just have to temper that, for forgetting even the political will and the goals, and just keeping that in mind. And so that's a big challenge. It's just a huge challenge as we're planning, to keep in mind, so.
Biggest thing I see is the growth center at the end. That's the biggest thing we've had, 20 years plus in the making. It makes a dramatic difference to the population around here. That took 20 years to get where we are right now, easy 20. You know, and to even think about going beyond that in Colchester, the residents of Colchester would not be thrilled with us. That's the way I look at it. Unfortunately, I know the state's big on growth and all that, but to come up with a big number and start stating, because I heard twice tonight on 2 different news stations, one was 30,000 by 30 and 29,000 by 29. Now, I don't know if they were talking about the state, if they were talking about Chittenden County, but all I'm thinking is anybody that doesn't come to these meetings or pays attention, you're looking like, has that got to do with my backyard? You know, so that's how I look at things. But I got it. I got where you're at and where we're looking at, but I'm just seeing what I see.
And you dared to go to 17. I
Yeah.
wasn't gonna touch that, Rich.
Well, to continue talking about 17, just real quick, I just want to stress that there's a lot of time between now and 2050, right?
Sort of.
Sort of.
Maybe for you.
Yeah, still be alive then?
Yeah, I know, I'm adding up the years, and how many decades is that from now?
There's still a lot of time left for me, at least. There's a lot of time to do planning work.
Yeah.
And, you know, we've been fortunate in that we have access, well, as of right now, we'll see what happens with the feds, but as of right now, we have access to a lot of federal highway dollars here in Chittenden County. And, you know, past administrations have been able to allow us to flex that to do projects that have a land use nexus. And so we've been able to fund 80%, 20% local, 80% of these large, you know, what it's traditionally called master plan projects or neighborhood projects that look at transforming areas into something different over the course of time. And I mean, even writing the bylaws to go along with that. That won't solve your infrastructure problems. That goes along with it. Let's do the planning, let's figure out the infrastructure. But a lot of them have been more urban historically. They've been, you know, the Winooski master plan, form-based code to follow, Taps Corners, a bunch in Burlington. But we've also done more rural master plans and form-based codes, Riverside area in Jericho, Westward's Common. And so we have access to funds to help the plan. And that requires match, it requires the federal government to not change how we can use those funds for the next 4 years. What I would say is, if, you know, target looks high as a part of your 2027 town plan, start thinking about, are there areas in our town that we could transform that could accommodate a lot of this target without changing all the rest? And if so, you know, come to us and we'll try to figure out how to fund the project to help you out.
Taylor, looking at this at a 2030 and a 2050 clip is hard.
Yeah.
Have you thought about what the next check-in is after 2030?
That's a really good question. No, I have not. No, I've been, it's all of us right now are let's.
And maybe
figure
it's
out
your
a lot to do.
ECOS time frame. I don't know. Do you have a set
It would
cycle?
Well, ECOS is weird. we have 8 years, so if we adopt in 2026, theoretically, we don't have to adopt again until 2034. That said, we have a couple sub-plans in ECOS, right? We've got our comprehensive economic development strategy, and we have our metropolitan transportation plan. Both those are valid for 5 years. And so, yeah, we're probably more checking in early 30s than 2034, but yeah, I haven't thought about next steps yet. I like that you are. Let me know.
Well, I
as
just
you do
think,
it.
asking a lot of communities to take the leap to 2050 is
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah,
But asking them to take the leap to 2034 is a little bit
yeah,
easier.
that's fair. No, I like that framing. Thank you.
And the 2050 number is large.
Huge.
And it is large because it's kind of, I don't know how old I'll be. Maybe still here, I don't know. Definitely not here. Maybe still here. But having a year in between, I think,
Mhm.
I think that's a great point.
is a little easier.
Yep. You're in between. Okay. I look forward to talking to you in the tax subcommittee.
I didn't know we were meeting again.
Yeah, I know. News now. Anything else on housing targets? I know it's scary.
Just got a background question of how these targets were developed. Were they developed based on
Yeah.
I can send you the
population
report,
growth?
Rebecca, because it's interesting.
Okay. So,
I had to read it like 3 times
Okay,
to
so,
understand
Part 5.
how they came up with these numbers. It eventually made some sense. I didn't agree with it, but at least it was
Yeah, I'd be
logical.
interested.
You want to take that one?
I'll try and then you can add on. So, one way I've heard people talking about these housing targets is that it's the amount of housing that needs to be added in Vermont to normalize the housing market. Because right now, we don't have enough housing that's affordable, we don't have the right size, I think you know this too, we don't have the right housing mix for changing household sizes. And we have a lot of housing that's not in good shape and really can't be inhabited for much longer. And so normalizing the housing stock is building enough houses to take care of all of those factors. Changing household sizes, people moving in, houses that go out of commission, can't be lived in anymore, need to be replaced. So it's really, sometimes when we think about growth, we think about in-migration and more people coming to Vermont, but at the same time, what's happening is people are living longer. People are living in, 2-person households instead of, or 1-person households instead of 4 or 5-person households. People are living in different parts of the state, people want different things. So all of those are factors that I believe have gone into that. And those are all demographic and societal factors that change how we use our houses and what we need out of them and for how long. So, and of course, addressing homelessness, it also includes, how many, as we normalize the housing market, that helps us get homes from
But there is a science to where that low and high end of that range came from. And why there is, did you say the range for 2050 was massive,
Yeah.
massive. But there is an explanation in the housing report for where each number was actually derived from. The low end being sort of the trends that are observed now, and sort of if we continue with the status quo, with a little bit of extra. I can send everyone the report that discusses this, which released the numbers.
Yeah, I'll add nothing to that. If you read the report and you have questions, you can send them our way and we can try to get you answers.
It's a long report. Been warned.
I have to just check with my chair if I can ask a question.
Yeah, go for it.
So the reports I'm reading, like Pew reports, is that Vermont will be one of the 4th lowest growing states by like 2030 or 2040. because of the net effect. Not that people aren't moving here, but more people are leaving here. So the net effect of population growth is like 0.04. So I'm just like wondering who's right in terms of this housing.
And add in climate refugees, and who knows? I think it's a really unpredictable business at this point. I think what we have is the data that's in this VHFA report that, you know, looks at historical trends, looks at normalizing the vacancy rate, looks at housing the homeless, looks at natural kind of, decommissioning is the wrong word, essentially like housing cycle leaves the market because it's deteriorated. I mean, that's the best we can do, and that's really kind of probably the low end of that, the range they provide in that report. I think the high end is you know, more of probably what a healthy Vermont looks like in terms of having enough homes to house those people that do want to move here, having enough homes that, you know, maybe people decide to not live here because their housing might be affordable, not unaffordable. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I see those reports too. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know.
And I would add that in-migration and out-migration is one set of factors in Vermont, but so are birth and death rates. So our death rate exceeds our birth rate. So
Say that
more
again.
people are dying than are
Right.
being born in Vermont.
Right.
And so that's called natural increase, but it's a natural decrease in Vermont. So net increase comes from migration, whether that's domestic or international. Yeah, so it's all of those factors and ways that we grow and shrink.
But a lot of that is based on jobs, people moving here. I mean, that's why people aren't moving here. It's just that, you know, they can make higher salaries, you know, leaving here.
I mean, we did a comprehensive economic development strategy across West Central Vermont a couple of years ago, and we did a lot of surveying with employers across West Central Vermont, which is Washington County, Chittenden County, Addison County, Rutland County. The number one thing we hear from employers is we need more housing for people to move here to take jobs.
Interesting.
I mean, we know people haven't taken jobs at large employers like Beta or wherever
Right.
else. That,
No,
because
you're right.
there literally
Yeah.
aren't enough houses.
Yeah.
Doctors.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know.
Others are moving here and bringing their jobs with them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, they can afford to.
Yeah. Okay. Don't want to take up any more time.
A lot
I
of
will send,
uncertainty.
I will send everybody the reports.
Okay.
I think you'll find it interesting.
I want to stress one other thing though, just to counterpoint Kate a little bit. I mean, Chittenden County is growing.
Right. Probably.
I've been working statewide for so long.
Yeah,
I've
so-
been at CCRPC
Yeah.
for 3 months.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Chittenden County is growing. There is natural increase here,
Yes.
as opposed to the rest of the state.
Yeah.
And so there certainly is need for housing in the state. We know commute times over the past 20 years for jobs in Chittenden County has increased a ton because people can't find affordable housing in Chittenden County communities, so
Yeah.
they move to Fairfax or Baker Place.
Yeah.
So
St. Albans.
St. Albans.
Yeah, we get the Colchester builds it, we fill it. There's no doubt
Yeah.
about it. We got that part. Yeah, I understand that.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for this discussion, for your questions, for the way you're engaging with this. This is an excellent start. I'm going to look to the chair and to Kathy Ann to see if we have a little more time to talk about the outreach plan. I know we're at 8:15, so I'm checking in on what you'd like to do next.
No, absolutely. It's going to be part of our lives, so
Yeah, great. Thank you.
educate ourselves.
All right, so shifting gears. Did you receive the engagement plan as a part of your packet? It's a draft. It's got orange text all over it, so you know it's a work in progress. But I mentioned at the outset that meaningful engagement is a key priority of Act 181, particularly when we're talking about land use, when we're thinking about things that are going to have an effect into the future. We want to make sure that those have fair outcomes and fair benefits for people. We know that in the past, land use decisions have sometimes been used to exclude people from opportunity, from communities, from affordability. And so we want to try and rectify that a little bit by being very thoughtful in our outreach and trying to engage people who don't typically get heard in government processes. So A big focus of Act 181 is what's called environmental justice populations, and that is defined as BIPOC individuals, which is Black, Indigenous, and people of color. People with low incomes are often not granted access or benefits, and people with English language access needs, where there's limited English proficiency in the home. So those are some of the key groups that we want to reach and understand the implications of this future land use map. And this is a community process, and we're interested in hearing from you which groups might have something important to add. So we put together this draft public engagement plan, and first thing I'm going to change is to write Colchester at the top instead of South Burlington.
Oh, I changed it. I forgot to tell you, I changed it in the.
You changed it to South Burlington?
They got the Colchester one.
You fixed it. Okay.
Thank you.
Good team, thank you. I want
There's
to
this
assure
Colchester.
you that the text of the Colchester plan is Colchester's text. It is not a cut and paste from another town. Everybody's been working real hard at all the towns. So what we do in this document is we lay out the community context, what's going on here that we should be aware of as we enter into this conversation about the future. We try to summarize other public engagement efforts that have taken place. We want to talk with you about best ways to reach people. So I'm going to just walk through this plan and kind of ask you some questions about, based on your local expertise and how we can do engagement. So starting with the community context section, I've summarized about the wastewater project in Alice Bay. I've summarized about the rate of population growth between 2010 and 2020. We've talked about the uniqueness of this municipality with a variety, the population and the different land types. So I wonder from your perspective, are there other key points about community context, what's happening in town that we want to document here and have in the background as we start outreach?
Do you want to display, do you want me to display the plan at all?
Sure, thank you. And the other half of it.
Colchester. Colchester, it says, oh,
That's what I say, I haven't seen it change.
I don't know why it's not, okay, bear with me. Colchester,
That's
Perfect.
they don't know what we're talking about.
Yeah, so let's scroll down to the second page in the community context and see if we can, if we have anything you want to round out in that section.
Second page, I'm sorry.
There it is, yeah. What other community context might influence engagement in the future land use mapping?
I just made out a short list when I read that.
Go for it. There you go.
Yeah. So, okay, I'll just read it all. So elderly, working class, like low income, farmers, like Pine Island. I think they're either Tibet, maybe?
Nepalese.
Nepalese, yep. Our business community, students, people in food production and businesses. And then also I think there's a pretty large Congo population from the Congo here as well. But you know, the elderly, I think, is growing. Our demographic in elderly Vermonters is growing. And I think it'd be really good. You probably would have to go to their centers or where they're living, but just to hear from them as well.
Thank you. What are, do you know of any places that older adults gather? Are there community meals? Is there a senior center, activity center?
Our community center is opening in a week, so hopefully there'll be opportunities for them to gather there. And that would probably be a very nice place for you to gather the community.
Thank you. Okay. Great. So those, you identified some key populations that maybe don't access these types of conversations as
Yeah.
much as others. Yeah. Do you know, you mentioned that you think there might be a large Congolese population. Do you know any community leaders or
Yep.
do they?
So there's and they were just on the news tonight. They run,
What's the Congolese Community Association?
no, it's a care their business is providing care for senior citizens, not medical care, but home-based care. Good, it's like, it's right across from the Price Chopper, their office. Do you know?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, there's a man in there named Francis, and I can't remember his last name, but he's kind of like a leadership person in that community.
Thanks.
Yeah. Manga, I think, M-A-N-G-A, maybe. And I think Anson Tebbets works a lot with the farming community. I know when there was flooding, I went up to work with them, and he was also working with them to get them some help.
Okay, great. Good. What other thoughts do folks have, whether it's about particular groups, best ways to reach people, background information about Colchester?
I think we do it all. We have multiple ways of reach. We're on YouTube now, as far as I know. We're on the local community stations. You know, we have even Zoom, you can come in on occasions. So we've kind of touched on everything.
Rich, do you recall what was most successful with the last town plan?
We went from corner to corner. So we would have meetings over in Porter's Point, probably today's world, we can email everybody, but let the community know in that end of the world, we are now visiting you. We're looking at the master plan, this is what our thoughts are. So we would have a meeting in every corner. Colchester's large. We were up on a community center they have on the other side of town. Back then, we were at Mount Space School before this was built. We've been at the Village in Union Memorial School. We had meetings in there. So we came to where people are, so it's a 2-minute drive for them to get to us. And that was pretty productive.
And how do you get the word out about that?
Back then, I think it was mailings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Is there a-
Just front page forum. There are so many people join, and
Yeah.
it's such a great way to get the word out. And now it goes out to all of Colchester, like any one of us can post something and it goes out to all of Colchester.
Great. Great. Is there just one front porch forum account for Colchester, or do you have it divided by
No.
districts at all?
It's just Colchester.
There's actually a Facebook group for Colchester, too.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm not personally on it, but people are.
I'll just add that, yeah, I mean, as a part of our engagement efforts, we will have the map eventually be on some sort of public-facing platform where people can go and comment on it. And so some of these broader methods like Facebook or Front Porch Forum, we can certainly use. We have access to Front Porch Forum across the county to get folks to respond to that essentially survey.
It's not an easy thing to do,
No.
there's no doubt.
Would setting up a booth at like a town meeting, during voting?
We're getting a lot of town meeting day requests.
You are?
So yeah, we might be town meeting date out. We might be booked up already, especially in the smaller towns. But yes,
Okay.
we could if we had capacity.
This may seem like a silly question, but do you do town meeting day on town meeting day?
Mhm.
Okay.
No, we do it the
Oh,
night
Monday.
before, but it'd be voting, you know?
Yeah.
Sometimes I think I've seen during voting where there are like booths, you know, where
People are taking.
a community organization is giving out information on something.
Okay. Good.
Town meeting's an informational meeting for us.
Great. Thank you. That's what I was.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no voting.
Yeah.
If you agreed that that would be a good place for us to show up with a map and some flyers, who would I talk to about doing that? Would I go through Kathy Ann and talk to the?
Probably Julie, don't you think?
Julie's our town clerk. I'm not sure if they have any policies about tabling or not.
Yeah,
I'm not familiar with them if there are.
yeah.
Maybe if we pursue that, I could go through you. And
Yeah,
connect with Julie, we
I
can all
could.
learn. Can you think of some past public engagement efforts that worked really well? Or some things that you've learned from recent town plan updates or community conversations? What are some like takeaways that you've heard from the public lately?
Same as always, slow growth. Colchester's big on slow growth. They still like a rural look. They're not upset that we have a Costco. They like all that. It's a benefit to our community. We're very diversified when it comes to our housing stock, our commercial stock. We don't have a downtown, which is unique.
That's because it was Winooski.
It was Winooski,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Kicked us to the curb.
I'm gonna put that's some good background. I'm gonna put it up in the context section because it's sort of, what's on people's minds.
Yeah, and we talked about Mounts Bay, because we did a lot of rezoning, and again, we touched on it again the last few months with the sewer pipe. That's a big concern. So they do not want us to grow fast in Colchester. Take our time, try to do it right. Quality of life is important. I think that's why when we build, they come, Colchester's not afraid to spend the money. We have the capital parks program, we have the infrastructure program. We built this building, we have a new rec center down the road. They're very positive on the community.
One thing we'd ask you to keep in mind is, the area of the fort is physically disconnected. You cannot get there without going through another town. And so it's easy for people to forget that, that is Colchester.
Yep.
And I've heard people who live in that part say that they feel very disconnected and feel sort of like the child that was left outside.
Yeah.
So, I would make sure to keep the folks who live in that part of town in mind, and special outreach to them might be appropriate just because they're not passing by the town hall every day. They're not passing through what is, even though we don't have a downtown, whatever is our core areas for civic areas, our schools. Those kids are on buses
Yeah.
quite a while. They have to go through another town to get on their bus to our schools. So if there's a geographic part of town to pay a little extra attention to, certainly the folks on that side of town in the fort or adjacent,
When you say
for
special
sure.
outreach is warranted, do you have an idea of what that could look like? Do you think
Well,
postcards, flyers on doors?
I think the good thing is that the housing over there is dense. It's mostly multifamily housing with, I think, shared lobby space in many of the buildings. So, posters, bus stops are options just because there is some shared internal living space. I don't think that they are necessarily well managed with any sort of HOAs or community.
Are you talking about the ones facing,
We've got Champlain Housing Trust owns a couple buildings now. Some of the fort buildings that have been rebuilt, the Cavalry apartments, and then the ones further down. And then there's all of Winchester Place. I don't think they have any sort of community center over there. I don't- They are CHT, but I don't think there's any sort of centralized, there's like a playground, which is not getting much use at this season. But I don't think there's any sort of internal, like, clubhouse or, and they're like,
the Dalton Drive buildings have an association.
yes, do they? The condos? Because there's a mix
Yeah.
over there.
Because they have a group that kind of oversees
Okay.
that role of housing there, that's from Essex boundary.
Yeah. So CHT may be a good contact because they own so
Yeah.
many of the properties. They may be able to help you, put you in touch with some of their property managers.
We're gonna be doing, focus groups with regional and statewide interested and affected parties too. And, the affordable housing folks are folks that'll be on a part of those, and so CHG will be happening that way.
I would guess that they're also going to overlap with some of your environmental justice populations.
Yep.
Don't we have a mobile home area?
Several.
I know, but
Oh, over there,
in
yes,
the
yes,
Fort
I should
area.
keep
Yeah.
going up before I run out of Colchester. There's
For it.
the fort, there's Winchester Place, and then there is a state-owned Sterling Mount, no, I don't know.
That sounds right, Sterling something.
Yeah.
Vance?
So I can see them being very concerned of what's happening in certain.
There is a small mobile home park just past that before you get to St. Michael's College, tucked in the back.
And there's
As
the one
well.
on Susie Wilson Road.
And then you run out of Colchester geography.
Oh, okay, now,
Yeah.
okay, yeah.
Yeah, Westbury, you know,
Yeah.
folks are running the honor list too.
Scale. That's good. That's
So-
good.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Well, great, those are some key groups to reach out to. We've brainstormed a little bit about getting in touch with folks over at, the Fort, Westbury, and that's resident owned, right? It's on the village. Co-op, resident co-op. What are some other, based on the groups that we've talked to, do you have other ideas of places, ways to reach out, ways to reach people and types? Should it be meetings? Should it be interviews? Should we show up at a farmer's market? Should we hang out at the library on Saturday morning?
So what would the questions be that you would be asking them?
Yeah, so we would talk a little bit about what we're doing. We talk about how this map looks to the future of the region and helps focus investment, especially for the purposes of housing, and would say, would show the map and say, well, what do you think? What questions do you have? What concerns do you have? This is a pretty high-level exercise that we're asking individuals on their way to the library to look at. We recognize that, so we know that some of the information we're going to collect will be valuable, but maybe a little aside from what we're working on. We're still going to collect it all and hand it to all of you to work on for your town plan update, to take into account.
great.
So I think we'll be collecting feedback on the map. We'll hear a lot of things other than that we will document.
Have you guys thought about like going through like the high school, maybe contacting a large number of students, and then that's kind of gonna, give them some sort of an exercise or, something to take home to the parents? I mean, that's a kind of good way to contact a huge population that may not attend any meetings or, get a lot of people involved in future homeowners especially also, just to kind of what's going on in the town they're living in and whatnot.
Would love to if we could, but the schools are always tough to
Yeah.
work with.
Airport Park will give you some diversity of residents. Airport Park, especially in soccer season. Yeah.
Soccer season, that's true. I was thinking of local realtors. They have to
That's
keep-
interesting.
Yeah, they have people looking for housing all the time, and they could at least get the word out that there's.
We definitely, the Realty Association are folks who we're going to talk to as a part of a statewide and regional interested in affected parties list. But yeah, maybe specific communities we can tap local realtors too. I know you know.
What would be a fun way to reach people? Do you have any annual community events where it would be cool to have the Regional Planning Commission there?
We
Street
can-
fair?
We have an October festival for Colchester.
We do the skate with a cop, can be the skate with a.
That's your planner.
Winter Carnival
That
this
it.
Yeah.
weekend, or does that already happen?
Yep,
It's
just
just
happened.
passed.
Just happened.
1, 2, yep.
Okay.
There is an Independence Day celebration.
Yeah, 4th of July is big.
Free fireworks.
Parade.
I should have, those are all really fun, and I should have mentioned that we're aiming to do this in March, April,
Yeah.
which I know is not
Not as fun.
the most dynamic time for activities in.
It's gonna be hard to, reach people organically that way,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Any other thoughts on groups to reach or best ways to reach them, or anyone that you recommend I talk to continue this brainstorm?
Dr. Amy Miner, who's the superintendent. I'd be glad to talk to her as well. I think I sense she'd be very open to, schools are very, careful about who they allow to come in, but I think, for the high school, that it would probably be a very good opportunity for kids to kind of think about that. And maybe if they had a little bit of time to know you're coming and to think about the questions you're asking, that might be helpful. I think getting them more involved would be great.
Thank you. Okay, well, you're welcome to follow up with us if you think of anything else. This is a great start. What I will do is, I'll distill this, I'll take what I've heard and try and boil it down to a few activities. I will try to think about additional connections that I might need to reach different groups and kind of do some more research on those so that we can get the community involved and also have special emphasis on people who aren't usually involved. So that is all I have on the outreach. Anything else?
No, I think, we do want to get away from the usual suspects a bit. We'll have general population outreach kind of to get those usual suspects and get their comments on the map. And yeah, I think in terms of, we're doing this in 19 municipalities in a 3 to 4 month time frame. So yeah, there's a lot of us working on this. We're probably thinking 3 to, I keep saying 3 to 5 events per municipality. Staff keeps saying 2 to 4. It'll be somewhere in there. And we'll work with Kathy to finalize the list.
How'd they come up with this drop date for this map?
What's that?
How'd they come up with a drop date for the map?
In terms of like when we need to have it done?
Yeah,
It statutorily came up with the end of 2026. Why did they pick end of 2026? Because I think they wanted us to get it done fast.
right.
Get these exemptions permanently in place. We're gonna aim for quicker because our regional plan expires in June 2026. And we didn't feel like we could really start working on the map until legislation passed or had overturned in the veto session in June. And so, yeah, we're 6 months in, we got a draft map, we're doing outreach.
Yeah, nothing's easy about it. I mean, for us to pass supplements, if we're a rocket ship, we could do it in 4 months.
Yeah,
So I got it.
it's a little hands on deck right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, all hands on deck.
It's busy, and at the same time, it manages to be a pretty thorough process, so.
Right.
um,
So again, so my concern for us is the same. I still don't want fantasy put on paper that one day somebody can't relate to. That really is the goal for me, I guess. I've been here way too long, maybe. So in 93, 94, same story, different group, different ways to push the project forward. Back then, it was with assessment. If you had a building lot in Colchester, you were assessed about $100 a year. Then they went to highest and best use, and you were $150 a month, just like that. You were building. If you were a builder in Colchester, you filled your lots fast. It's how it was pushed. It wasn't the greatest idea because not a lot of quality building got done, but we did finish some developments pretty fast, including one of the houses I lived in, because we had a piece of property we liked looking at. We couldn't sit there dead, so you build on it. That was in 93. I mean, that's a ways ago.
Was that a local decision or a state?
Statewide. Yep, for Chittenden County.
Property was assessed. Okay.
Yep.
So
You don't have to worry about that now, because now we're assessed for building lots. Yep, change the world.
When you look at the map, whenever we come back in a couple weeks or next month,
Yep,
we keep trying to explain the map in that upside down pyramid. We're going to be up here where it's very, very, very broad, in these 11 categories. And we have to use with statutory definitions, right? And they're
Yep.
not very specific on uses or density of development. They're very general.
yep,
And so we're just trying to stay up here in very, very non-specific areas
yep,
to generally define what's appropriate for what areas in Colchester and across the region. You're going to refine that when you work on your municipal plan again in 2027 and be more specific. And then you're going to be even more specific when you work on your regulations. you guys really are going to be, will remain the ones in charge of, how development is done in Colchester. So, yeah, we're trying to think about it in that way. That we're really trying to stay up here, very broad, very general. You're going to get more specific through your own work here.
Okay. Anything else from us?
I'd like to see the
Can't wait to see the map.
yeah, see that
Yeah.
map.
Taylor, did you distill statutory definitions of these onto any sort of cheat sheet
Yes.
or summary yet?
We'll bring them out. Yeah.
Can you send that in advance? Okay. That would be helpful. Because I've read the mapping guidance, and some of them are the one sentence like you read, but some of them are much denser.
Yep.
But I imagine you've already sort of created a cheat sheet.
We got cheat sheet, all right, yeah. No new work there, we can just send them along to you. Awesome. Well, we'll be back in a couple weeks, hopefully, to talk about the map.
Great, thank you.
We're gonna look at, just full disclosure, we're gonna look at Kathy and Zach first. Make
Yep.
sure we're, aren't any big red flags, something crazy. We're not coming to you with something half-baked. Hopefully staff's okay with where we are, I think we're okay. I'll say the rules have been challenging, the rural districts, and how they're defining the statute and how to map them.
I'll give you the legislature's been very aggressive in zoning and putting these
Yeah.
broad ideas to small municipalities. Everybody's unique in Vermont. It's amazing to me we do such a broad stroke, not gonna lie. So, that's where I'm at. But tonight you're doing your job, appreciate it.
Can you put the Cirque Highway on that map?
It's dead.
Put what?
I don't know if you're being serious or. if
No,
you're
I'm
joking.
being serious.
Put what on it?
The Cirque
Probably not.
Highway.
We're not, yeah,
Oh.
Cirque's dead.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
that's a
dead,
dead
it's
job.
Cirque is
gone.
deader than dead.
Okay, exactly.
What, we know where the right of way is. We can point out on the, in terms of the parcel lines where the right of way is, but Cirque is not something we even talk about regional anymore.
Can we not call it the Cirque? Can it just be a road? It would really help us out a lot with traffic.
We had Cirque Alternatives project that happened after the Cirque died. I think a couple of the Cirque Alternative projects are going to be constructed in Colchester in the next couple of years. Thinking about Prim Road realignment as being one of them. Laker Lane was also another one of those projects. But yeah, in terms of what V-Trans plans to do with that right-of-way, there isn't a lot of talk. They've been holding it. What I would do is, if you're actually interested in talking about Cirque, I'd refer you to Lenny Churchill, who runs our transportation section at CCRPC.
Okay.
Taylor's right, Cirque is dead.
What?
Cirque is dead.
It's not coming back.
You can call CFL.
Is it zoned for housing? Can we?
I mean, the state owns a right-of-way.
State owns it.
Anything's possible.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks so
So-
much.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Are we planning on meeting on the 18th
Do you
then?
want to, it's on your agenda for later, did you want
I
to
know,
talk
but
about it
should they
now, or do you
know?
want to talk about it later? I can communicate with them
Okay,
to let them know. They
Yeah.
know that it's a possibility.
all right,
It's a
perfect.
hold on our calendar.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, all set? We'll move on. We're moving. All right, so we're going to do an initial discussion of items for potential inclusion in future supplement 48.
Do you want to do a time check first? I think Rich and I talked about, these are like, if there's enough time, we'll do them, if not. You want to do one, not two? Do you want to feel it out?
Yeah, let's fill it out. We got a few minutes.
Okay.
When are we supposed to
9,
move that we were going to extend beyond a certain time?
at 9 o'clock.
I know.
We got a few minutes. It's like
I
we're
tend to
right.
not watch the clock, so I'm counting on you guys.
I can't, there's a glare on the clock.
I know, that's the
Yeah.
problem with me too.
Ball
but
up a
You're
piece
good
of
to go.
paper
We'll
and
holler
throw
at you.
something
Shut
at
the
me.
TV
No, I
off.
said paper, I didn't say remotes. So yes, please interrupt me at any point if the clock starts to run late. And I will not be offended, I promise you.
Stuff we've already kind of gone over.
These are 2 new ones.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry, I keep making your list longer.
Yeah, you want to get
But
rid of
things
that
keep
little
coming
short
up.
list.
You don't need to make work for me, I can make enough work for myself. Okay, for you tonight, so I keep the list, so this is, I think to keep things simpler, this is going to be a running tally of the things that we're working on. So I keep taking the memo, and I keep it's the same base memo, we're just adjusting for the date. And what I'm trying to do with you every time is to show in blue what we're talking about any given evening. And any orange is new text in this long list. So you don't have to be like, Kathy, I don't want to read this again. You can look for the orange text for anything that's changed, because sometimes we might change something small within an item that we've talked about before. So K and L are two new items that were not in your memo last time. Okay. They are two things that have sort of come up that I just wanted to talk to you about for potential amendments within the regulations. And if you don't like them, we'll remove them from the list. If you like them, we'll develop language a little bit better. Okay? So these are first looks at these two items. So I'm going to move it down to K. So skipping all this, because this is all stuff you looked at last time. No changes have been made to these pieces. No orange, no blue, skippy skip. Okay? Look at that. And just like that, we are on page 10. Yay! Replacement of non-conforming structures damaged by fire or natural disaster. So we did talk a little bit last time about things that were extension of the ability for things that were sort of violations, or things that were non-conforming but that were outside the statute of limitations. So that's what we talked about before. When we said, can we change that to a year? That was for items that had maybe never gotten a permit, but were 15 years old, right? And so we were addressing what could happen to those things. Okay, so when you have something, right now, you have a non-conforming structure, and there are a lot of those in town, especially things on the lake, or something that might have been built close to the road 20, 30, 50, 70 years ago, right? A lot of houses, or sheds, or anything like that. You have a year, regardless of what that structure is, to rebuild a non-conforming structure. And that's been in the regulations for as long as I can figure out. Now, a lot of people will come and they'll start to go through the permitting process, especially if it's a camp on the lake. Camp on the lake will sit there while they are doing that permitting process. What can I do? What can I do? Especially if you've got something that's sort of decrepit or like older and somebody's really willing to invest a lot of money in it. But it sits there. They go through the permitting process, they get all their approvals, they go through the DRB, and these things take a while. But as soon as they get through all of that, they've got their permits in hand, then they knock it down, and that 1 year clock kicks off. Okay, they got a year to build a whole house. And it's usually tight for people, but possible. Okay, a year. Got a lot tighter after COVID when supplies were tougher to get your hands on. Most people can do that in a year, and we haven't gotten a lot of complaints about that 1 year. Now throw into the mix, you didn't plan for that house. You did not get your permits in place because your house burned, or a tree fell on it, or something unexpected happened. You were not planning to replace that structure. Now you have no choice. Your year kicks off the day that that fire or natural disaster, flood, happens. Your year time clock has started to tick down, and you haven't gotten a single permit. You haven't started to go to the board or to our staff and say, what can I do? And you might be in that permitting process for 2, 3, 4, 6 months of that year. And that's if you start on day one. You might spend your first 3 months of that grieving, dealing with insurance, doing who knows what. And then 6 months in permitting. And then you have 3 months to build a whole structure. Get an architect, who knows what else you have to do. So 12 months is really tight. And this 12 months applies whether you are talking about a whole structure or a shed or whatever it is. So my proposal to you is to, I wonder if we can loosen that up a little bit for some folks. Especially if they are dealing with something related to something that was out of their control. So again, you know, as I've said here, adopted language, and what you're seeing here is what's in the language. Everything that's in italics here is their existing language. So you 1 year from the date of the damage, destruction, or removal. That's the current language. And as I've said, this 1 year, what I am recommending is that you adjust the language, and this is spaghetti at the wall, first suggestion, but feel free to make a different recommendation if you like the idea of it. Requiring the completion of the structure within a year to instead obtaining a building and zoning permit within a year. And then, once you get a building and zoning permit, that's good for 18 months. So instead of a year to do everything, and that's full completion of construction, a year to get your permit, and then you'd have 18 months to construct it. So you have, you know,
Still not
30
a lot of
months.
time.
To do that.
Seems reasonable.
Yeah. no,
Very.
it's here.
Just a first
Yep.
thing for you to respond to. Too long, too short, bad idea altogether.
Takes you a minute just to get your insurance stuff together in today's world.
Yeah, this is,
And, you know,
Been
if it's
tight.
a disaster throughout the town,
Yeah, I know, right?
like LA, forget it.
Yeah,
Everybody's gonna be in the same boat.
yeah.
I think everybody would have to get waivers, but yeah, no, it seems reasonable to me,
Does it?
Yep.
yeah.
and there are some parts of town, what I didn't write in here, but just for context, there are some parts of town still that do allow you more. So LS1 gives you 10 years. I think that was because of the rezoning that
Interesting.
happened.
Yep.
You have 10 years to rebuild a non-conforming structure once you tear it down. And LS3, which is the Lake Shore on East Lake Shore Drive, we gave them 4 years when we rezoned that. And that was largely because of the lifespan of wastewater or something, a wastewater permit. Those are the only two places where there is a time frame other than a year. So 10 on West Lake Shore, 4 on East Lake Shore. But otherwise, elsewhere in town, it is 1 year.
Good.
Yeah, 10 years seems like a long time.
Yeah, I wasn't here when the 10 years was implemented. I'm not sure
That's
the genesis of
Slid
that.
knocked down the hotel.
Huh?
On West Lake Shore Drive, the old dilapidated hotel.
Yeah?
Osley wouldn't take it down, which I don't blame him, because he only had a year. So
Ah,
if we changed it to 10 years, they would take all the dilapidated structures out.
Yeah.
And now the, the sewer coming in and we rezoned for LS2 and LS1,
so
turned out to
they
be a good
could-
move.
They could rebuild on it then,
I'm sure they'll be coming to visit
as the
sometime.
10 years goes by, okay.
They've already been to the DRB?
Oh, they
Yeah.
have? Perfect.
Yeah. They're within their 10 years still, I think. Year
Very
6.
close.
Six.
Huh?
Seems like they tore that down.
Yesterday, right?
No.
Oh,
longer
No,
ago?
it seems longer.
Oh,
than
does
I
it?
that.
think
Yeah.
it's been 6 years.
Yeah.
Are they putting a restaurant and a little hotel or something?
Yeah, if you want to see the plans,
I'll be curious.
That'd be nice.
I can bring them to you next time.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
They
we
had
don't
a sketch plan with the board. Little duplex cottages.
Yeah.
5 of them? 5 little duplex cottages and 1 main inn. It's a small inn, a 2-story, it's built into a hill.
Yeah.
Okay. But is Hazlet developing it, or?
Yes.
No? Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be nice to see. That's our hard work right there. Yeah.
It's, yeah, they're cute. They're small scale. I think rather than putting one big structure that would totally block the view, there's a couple of them with gaps between them,
Mhm.
to sort of leave open some view between them.
Perfect. Just what we were asked to do. I like that.
And they're short, they're well below the height allowances.
I was gonna say, no 4 stories.
Gets
Yes.
better by the minute,
Since I
right?
know we talk about height a lot, boy, we know.
Yeah.
They are significantly under what is allowed for height, I believe.
Very good.
They're two, I
Keeping the
mean, look
carrot.
at little cottages. That's
Keeping
all I
the
can
carrot.
describe them as. They're 2 stories at the road front, but they actually sit a little bit below. And then sort of built into the hill a little bit. It was pretty tight,
Yeah, I'd like to see it.
tight spot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just like an aisle of drop off. There's actually, I don't think any parking right there. The parking's across the street.
Perfect. Perfect. I think that one gets the yes. Move forward, or
They got it.
Yeah.
They got some things to work on still, but it was just a sketch, so it was a general thumbs up from the board. Mostly it was shoreline encroachment questions,
yeah.
because the board is very protective. They do a very good job of making sure that the lakeside, the slopes are not cut back more than they need to be, which is everything our regulations try to
Yeah.
protect against. So that was the large part of the feedback. But
Perfect. Was there any audience for that one? Just curious. There must have been.
well, there were 2 people
Yeah.
from the general area, but they really didn't have many complaints. They just asked very thoughtful questions about pedestrian access along West Lake Shore. I think one was a resident of maybe, what's that road over there, Orchard Shore or
Shore Acres?
Shore Acres? maybe?
Oh, sure, acres, right.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, just really good questions, but not a, don't build there, we don't want to see anything ever.
Good.
So it was good, it was a thoughtful presentation.
Hmm.
I'll bring it to it. Happy to.
For sure.
So, I mean, kind of quick. I know it's one more thing to add in, but it seems like something we could tackle. That could have a big impact for some folks.
No, that's positive.
Go forward with it?
Yeah.
You like the
Yep.
time frame? Change it? Keep it?
Good.
You like it?
Yep.
Okay. We'll go with it. So I'll bring you real text next time we talk.
Yeah.
And then
Jump on to your next one. TikTok.
Jump on to my next one. Okay, so ADUs. So we talk a lot about ADUs. I know we're always talking about ADUs. So ADUs, just as a reminder, talking about housing tonight, keep up with the theme. So ADUs, as a reminder, except or accessory dwelling units, they are allowed, and they have been allowed since I believe 2005, under state statute, across Vermont, as an allowable housing type. And the regulations have changed, the text that goes with them has changed throughout the years, but generally, if you own a house, you can have an ADU. The current regulations for ADUs say that if you own a house, you can have, at minimum, 900 square feet. You can have less, but the town has to allow you to have at least 900. Or 30% of that principal unit in an accessory unit. There used to be some things about limiting the number of bedrooms. That's not the case anymore. There used to be some things about limiting who could live there. That's not the case anymore. There used to be some language about whether it could be detached or attached. Not the case anymore. There used to be some language about the principal, the owner, so you still have to live on the property. The owner of the properties has to live there. Still the case. But the owner does not have to live in the principal unit, the bigger unit. They can live in either. That was a change a couple years ago. That was very popular. So you could live in either the smaller or the big one, which has allowed people to sort of age in place on their property, but rent out their bigger unit. So that's really the sort of the big pieces. We do define in Colchester, while we don't limit the number of bedrooms, we say that it can't have more than the principal because it still has to be accessory. That's how we're defining accessory. It has to be less. But if the first one has 6, the other one can have 5. So why am I here with you guys tonight? Seems like it's all figured out, right? Okay. What's not figured out is this 30% thing. So the state law says 30%. the 30% of what? And there has been some inconsistencies in interpreting that locally through the years. And I think it's time for us to just say 30% of what? And be very, very clear what we mean is included when we are calculating 30%. I don't necessarily have strong feelings about this, and so this is one where you guys have to tell me what your strong feelings are. So if you have a house, I should have whiteboarded it. We're gonna pick on Rich. Rich has a house. Rich does have a house. Rich has a house. Rich has a garage that is part of his house. Two-car garage, Rich? Rich has a two-car garage, part of his house. So Rich wants to build an ADU. I don't know if Rich wants to build an ADU. But in this made-up scenario, Rich wants to build an ADU, okay? It's gonna be in the backyard. It's gonna be a detached ADU. And so he says, Kathy Ann, how big can I make it? It's gonna be bigger than 900 square feet. I don't want it to be 1,000. I said, well, Rich, it's gonna be more than 900. I gotta do some math. So I need to take your principal unit and figure out 30% of that. Now, some in the history of the Colchester Planning and Zoning Department have said 30% of the livable area of Rich's house is what we're going to measure. And some have said, well, Rich has a garage. We're going to take 30% of the whole of Rich's house plus his garage. And some have even said, Rich has a detached garage too. We're going to take 30% of all of the structures. Rich has a basement. We're going to count Rich's basement. Rich has a finished basement. Every time Rich's finished basement. What if it's unfinished? So, do you see how this starts to get?
Yeah, but
The math.
how you start dividing that up.
The math is the easy part. The what could use some clarity. Again, I don't necessarily, my goal is clarity here, so that we are consistent every time that this is implemented. And so what I'm asking you to consider, and I'm happy to give you a menu, so you can say yes or no, in or out, so that we are consistent every single time in what we are counting that 30% to be part of, okay? So, in Rich's example, where Rich owns a house with a garage that is part of it, and some of this is the 30% meant to represent a massing calculation? Because if it's massing, then that counting that garage kind of makes sense. Because it's part of his house. Right? It's part of that structure. It's an attached garage. It's part of his house. But that's not why 30% is there. We still have the garage. If it's detached, do we start into the business of detached structures as a whole? Do you get to count your chicken coop, your shed, your greenhouse? So,
Some people have 3-car garages.
3-car garages. There's a 5-car garage on the street.
Yeah.
So,
I had a first reaction to this,
yeah, I'd love to hear it.
which was basically living space. You know, your enclosed heating living space is what the floor area should be. I wouldn't count the garage.
I have seen heated space, I've seen habitable space. I have seen finished space. Just telling you what I've sort of seen out there that people have counted.
So the finished space is what you guys count for assessment for the total square footage though, right? So it has to have the 3 things, what is it, the flooring, electrical, insulation?
3 of 4.
3 or 4, yeah.
Yes.
3 or 4 what?
So the assessor has a definition of finished space. Floor, ceiling, heating or cooling, and windows.
I think so, yeah, I can.
So he'd throw in finished basement.
But the problem with the basement is usually you don't have the windows.
Well,
Is it windows? I should know.
I don't think it's,
Well-
yeah, I think it's insulation,
But it's 3 of the
flooring,
4.
Yeah.
and like finished like wall space basically,
Walls, ceiling, floor,
floors.
and.
Yeah, I think heating.
Maybe it's not windows.
I think it's heating,
Heating and, or
Yeah.
cooling.
yeah.
And you gotta get over 2,700 square feet, because you can get in 900 anyways. Right?
Yes, yes. So this really only matters for houses.
They're,
And
Giant houses,
to be
yeah.
clear, this has sort of come up with some properties where people are wanting to just, they're trying to make their ADU not not what you might think of as a accessory, like really they're putting a second house. Like we have seen ADUs, there's actually a couple that have been permitted that are upwards of 2,500, 3,000 square feet.
Yeah, it's a house.
Wow, really?
There's a couple.
So,
I'm not gonna name
and they
names.
could fit it, and they, you know,
Or
obviously,
properties.
no, obviously they can fit it on the land. The land supports it.
In these cases that I've seen, yes.
Right. That's another
You still have
criteria.
to, you still have to meet your coverage.
Exactly,
But that's pretty easy in a lot of lots.
yeah.
and you'd have a kitchen?
Yes, a
Yeah,
kitchen, or else
yeah.
it's not
Yeah.
an EDU. The
Yeah.
kitchen is
So,
really what defines.
I mean,
it.
would they have septic capacity for that?
They do have to have septic capacity. They have to show us that they have septic capacity. But that's actually fairly easy I shouldn't say easy. Because what we do see a lot of people do is either they can put in the system, they have enough money to put in the system, or they transfer bedrooms within, maybe they have a 4-bedroom permit. They keep 2 bedrooms in their current house, and put 2 in their ADU. At least that's what they put on the permit.
Yeah.
We never go in there again. I'm sure it's not at the end of the day. A year later,
2
2 and
offices.
2.
Because it's, yeah.
Yes,
Imagine that.
I've seen multiple permits
Yeah.
with 2 offices.
Mhm.
So again, I have no recommendations for you other than I think everybody benefits from clarity of what counts so that we're consistent across the board in what we're counting. You know, on one hand, if we're trying to promote these additional units, we could be, you know, pretty lenient. On the other hand, you're already getting 900, which is generous for an accessory unit, maybe not. And that this only comes in if you're talking about homes that are larger than 2,700 square feet.
Do they,
But it does get complicated when someone's like, well, I have a barn. Does my barn count?
I think the space still has to be livable, you know, habitable, you know, that's a good one.
do they need a parking space?
Yeah.
They do, but they only have to show one. That's
Just
state
one.
law. State law says we can only require them to demonstrate one
For an ADU?
for the ADU, which is pretty easy.
But you also have to keep parking for the primary.
Yes, 2 for the primary, 1 for the
It's a
new
minimum
unit,
of 3 parking spaces.
regardless of size.
So you don't like the idea of having built that ADU?
No, because it gets overwhelming. I did a project where I had to design an ADU, and it was a huge house. It was a 2-story house, you know, good footprint.
The
We did
ADU
not
was?
count the basement. We did not count the basement on that one. It was just the little space. I mean, it's an old house. And there's no windows or anything in the basement. But they had an attic space.
Did
So
you
we
count the
started
attic
counting
space?
that square footage, because it had a bedroom up there.
Can you do like the area of the structure? That way it's gonna like limit, you know what I mean? Instead of counting the square footage of the structure, you just measure like the area of that, you know what I mean, of like attached structure. So if you got a garage,
That
You know what I
one,
mean?
that one didn't have a garage. I didn't have to worry about the garage.
as long as it's attached, but I mean, that would still be like 900 square feet would be bigger than 30%, you know what I mean, of most structures even with a garage. Like if you got like a ranch house with a garage, you know, if you just measure the area of the physical house, if you got a 20 by 40 house, you know, in a 24 by 20 garage, I mean, 900 square feet still be, you know what I mean, you're not building like giant ADUs at that point. So if you just kind of,
Yeah,
that way, because otherwise you're counting, you know, up to 3 floors of space plus the garage space. And then you're taking 30% of that versus just saying, okay, you know, it's 30% of the house or 900 square feet.
I mean, it was a big house, and they wanted a 2-bedroom unit
For the accessory?
for the accessory, 1 story. They wanted everything to be handicap accessible, that sort of thing. And I believe it had, you know, it had to be restricted by the lot coverage and the setback, which made it even, you know, more difficult. We set it back from the road, so it was kind of almost behind the house, but it wasn't. It was off to the side. And being 1 story, it didn't take away from the 3-story building. But they were able to get an accessory dwelling unit that was more than 900 square feet. 'Cause it's almost impossible to get 2 bedrooms, 900 square feet.
Was this in Vermont?
Yeah, it was never built. They got estimates on how much it would cost, and they said, we can't do it.
I think the whole point of like the ADUs though is to be like somewhat, you know, constricted, because I mean, 30 by 30, I mean, that's like, I mean, I got a 2-bedroom camp, it's, you know, 930 square feet, I mean, that's perfect if you don't have, you know what I mean, 4 or 5 people living there. And that's, I think, the whole point of an ADU is to kind of create that space for maybe, you know, 2 people living in it, an in-law, you know, you know, somebody like that. So I mean, if you do the,
That's how we envision
Yeah.
it, but
I know, but that's the,
The world has changed too.
yeah.
All of a sudden now, this is no longer your mother-in-law apartment.
no, it's not.
Could be for the kids and their kids, and you get 4 in there.
Yeah.
But I think we're limited for most of the town, you know what I mean, if you kind of limit it to the overall square footage of the, you know, the initial dwelling, you know, counting the garage space, then you're just kind of looking at the footprint, as long as it's attached, it counts to it, and then your 900 square feet is gonna be max. It's gonna be bigger than 30% of the, you know what I mean, most houses in Colchester, if you kind of go that way. So it keeps the, doesn't create other issues as far as like lot coverage or setbacks, and it keeps the ADU smaller than
But
the
you said you're
primary.
counting the garage area?
Yeah, counting everything that's attached, so basically counting
It's
like,
hard to get over
You
27.
mean what we're doing right now? I think that right now, more often than not, we are counting attached
structure.
structure. So when you build a house, for whatever reason, especially a new house, your garage is considered finished space. Because it does have those elements. I think short of the heat, most new garages do have sort of.
Yeah, people use them for gyms, or if you have, the other thing is if
Maybe
you
they
have,
have the heat, but,
yeah.
you know, they're short on the walls a lot of times. But even a lot of the walls are now being finished in new houses, in new garages. So I think that right now, attached garages, we are counting. Because in most cases, you're not exceeding much by that 900. Where the questions are really coming up is the detached structures, the large basements, the detached garages, or the semi-attached. There are a few places where there's like a detached structure, but somebody builds a breezeway.
That's per regs. I
But,
hate that reg with a
but
patch.
breezeway, I mean,
That's
that's
the
probably
worst.
something I'll be bringing to you
I can't wait.
next
I'm all over that one, please.
You want that one?
Oh, man,
All right,
yeah.
you can blame Rich if
Yeah,
the
I'd
list
get
gets
rid of
longer.
that, just like that.
But I did see a good regulation, somebody has one, the state does actually, what defines an attached structure.
Yeah.
So they've defined breezeway pretty well. Because people do like, okay, I'll just put a couple boards between my
Yeah.
detached garage and my house, and now it's attached. It's like, is it really? Is it really?
I think that one will be, we need a shop. That's-
There's
For the
not a
next
lot of
round.
them.
And just think about how big, small we want an ADU, right? We want somebody to be able to build a 2,500 square foot ADU if they could justify it. How much effort
That'd
would
be
it
an awfully
take?
big structure.
Yeah,
There are a
just like-
couple. I'm not gonna call people and properties out in front of everyone, but there are a few.
Yeah.
They're
If
big.
you got a big old house and you got a big piece of property, and now the state says, man, we gotta build. So,
Does that count
I know,
as a one?
it's a one.
I don't know. I think it should.
Look at that, knocked
I'm
out.
gonna count it.
Perfect.
I can think of some properties where the garage is bigger than the house.
Uh-huh.
Is it attached though?
Yeah.
That'd be my dream.
But even in that,
I was like, I don't need the ADU, I got my garage.
I don't get a garage.
I know someone who just built a house and the garage area is about the same size as the house.
There are a couple.
It's like, yeah.
Probably
I mean,
has.
even if you take that in consideration, even if you have like a 40 by 60 garage, and you measure just like the area of the house it takes, not starting, measuring 3 floors of square footage, you just say, okay, house is 50 by 50, you know what I mean? You're adding the garage plus the house, even if it's 30% of that, I mean, it's still not much larger than the 900 square feet that the ADU is permitted to be.
But no, it'd be bigger than 900.
Yeah, that's
It
right.
would be, but not by much, even if you have a giant garage, because let's say the house is 2,400 square feet and the garage is 2,400 square feet, you got, somebody likes cars or whatever. I mean, 4,800, square feet, combined, you take 30% of that, I mean, that's,
That's pretty
income.
big.
I mean, it's
Yeah,
big,
it's
but it's,
15?
And,
yeah,
and
That's
I know.
15.
What's
that
your
people-
standard
I know
two-car
that people-
garage?
24 by 24.
Yeah, somewhere around there.
So that's not that.
Yeah, it's tiny.
Yeah.
You get bigger than
So
that.
you're not getting a lot by adding by adding Rich's
Yeah.
attached two-car garage. We're not giving a big benefit.
Right, that's what he's getting
No,
at.
it's-
It would take a
it's the
lot of
bigger ones.
structure.
But I know that people who own the property, they wouldn't just take the first floor. If they had a 2 or 3 story house,
Yeah.
they're gonna take the full,
That's what I'm saying, just the perimeter of the
But they-
house would be, yeah.
I don't think even the state would allow that. I think they take at least the whole habitable space and add it
Really?
up. Yeah. And I know owners would look at it that way.
Yeah,
they wanna
it's-
maximize.
It's not terribly clear. And honestly, I think the next thing, maybe not this legislative session, but they've been talking, I mean, at some point, the next thing you're gonna see is duplexes having ADUs. I think that's the next thing we'll see. So we're having all of this, it was talked about last session, but it never got picked up. And I did see something really interesting. It was an article, and I could send it to you guys if you geek out about this stuff like I do. I can't remember the town. I actually thought it was a neat idea. You guys may not, but it was a certain amount of square footage is allowed in an ADU regardless. I should find the article. And so it was it was a duplex ADU. So you get X square feet. And if you can fit 2 efficiency apartments in those square feet, good for you. It was someplace in the south, like Savannah or something like that, because it was like Southern style architecture.
So you have 3 units.
You could have your
Yeah,
and they
right.
actually,
Yeah.
Triplex, they're tiny ones.
Yeah.
so you could have your house, and you got, I can't remember it was like 1,200 square feet. You get 1,200 square feet for an ADU. If that's 1 unit, that's 1 unit. If you want 2 600 square foot units, it had to be a single structure. There's only a certain amount of height you could have, you still had to have coverage limits, but if you had just like, they showed pictures. That's why I remember it was Southern style architecture. It looked like 2 little porches on the front, like.
I know
plantation style.
code-wise, you're gonna be into the multifamily, because code covers 1 to 2 family units. But they don't cover anything above that. You're into apartments.
In the same structure though, right? So this was like a single up front, and in the backyard was a little 1/1 detached. 1/1 in the back.
Interesting.
600 square feet over 600 square feet.
And it's not subdivided. That's just.
Not subdivided, I think that was the
Just-
point.
Wow.
And the owner has to live on property, and they kind of keep an eye on their tenants in the back, and apparently it's, the experiment's gone swimmingly. Not proposing it, I'm just telling you it was.
You know,
something I hadn't
it's
seen
interesting,
before.
because growing up, my grandparents, they lived in their little house, but then they kind of had their breezeway. And they had another building on the other side of the breezeway. This is in Texas, it was really a breezeway. I think they had more than one unit in there, but it was all their property, so it is possible.
I think with the demographics, with people getting older, I think, it'd be good for families to have a place to bring a parent, to live with them, and maybe a caretaker to have their place. I think that's where we're headed with people getting older.
I think that this particular one I was reading, it might have been like a college town or something. So they were like 2 efficiency apartments, like that people were renting to solo grad students or something, or couples or something like that, because they were so small. Again, anyway, just saying that the realm of what's being explored in the ADU world is so wide.
Do you see the downside? You've probably seen unintended consequences that you could kind of give us a heads up about?
Of ADUs?
Yeah. Anything?
Again, I think that it just goes back to what the purpose is, right? The purpose is to have some infill housing. The idea of the ADUs, you still have the owner on site, and I think that's what made them so popular, and people don't consider them an additional density because what made them really saleable back in 2005, and that's when I sort of started being a planner here, and I came into that conversation when it was like really starting, was that you had a different relationship because you had an owner on site with their tenant or their relative or whoever. And honestly, in 20 years, you almost never hear about problems with
Interesting.
them. I think they're very popular. They're a good way to get additional housing. Most people don't mind them even if they live next door to them. But yeah, we're just gonna be mindful of what, again, the purpose is. And if you start to go from an accessory, let's not forget that it's accessory, to something that becomes 3,000 square feet, are we still accessory, or are we just starting to figure out how to put additional units on a property? I don't know.
It's
I don't know
getting
the
that
answer to
size, that house, the primary house has to be huge.
It's either huge or they're starting to count a lot more things.
Yeah, I wouldn't count the barn, I'm sorry, that's
Yeah.
just.
I don't
I would
know.
not count a barn either.
How do you tax those?
The ADUs?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a good question.
We'll find out next year. Reassessment's coming.
Don't forget those ADUs.
Yeah, I don't know. I will ask for you because now I'm curious.
I know.
I saw the number recently as to how many we had. I was surprised. I think it's in that housing report.
All right.
It might say how many ADUs are in Colchester.
Hmm.
There's a lot of interesting. There's how many seasonal properties in Colchester. There was how many Airbnbs or short-term rentals there are. It was more than I thought. How many mobile homes there are. The housing report's fascinating.
Yeah, we have a lot of mobile homes.
It was about the number I expected. That number I was already aware of. But yeah, really interesting. So you guys can think on this if you want. We're not obviously ready to pass
But
anything, but
It's not just confusing here, it's confusing everywhere that people have written regulations, in terms of their plans for the ADUs. It's confusing.
have you designed a lot?
No, but,
No.
I mean, just doing that one, it was a lot of conversations with the local zoning director saying, are you sure? What, are you sure?
Yeah, and then, and we don't really find this to be a problem, but some places, it's a problem, like, if you already own the house, okay, so Rich's house, he's gonna put his ADU above his garage. He already owns the house, there's no new construction, there's no, but he's got a bonus room above his garage, that's where his little.
Some people convert their garages.
Yeah, so it happens that happens frequently. It's sort of the cheapest way to get into it. Some places are like, you're not gonna double dip in that. You no longer can count that space that you're converting, your bonus room above the garage, as your base number, because it's also your ADU number. We don't do that. We say, here's the number you're starting with. You already have 2,000 square feet with that space. Yes, 300 of it is gonna be your new apartment, but you could still count that as your base number.
That's fair.
But that's a debate in some communities.
Yeah.
Because they feel like you're double dipping.
All right.
So, think on it, give me some guidance next time. Again, my goal is just to make sure we're clear. I don't know.
I think a checklist would be good. We can do that. Yes, no. Bettable, not bettable. That's
Well,
right.
I think there'll still be discussions.
There you go.
Yeah, that's what you guys are for.
That's right. We'll
That's why
go
you're
at
here.
it. We'll go at it. All right, so we're gonna move on. Okay?
Okay.
Okay. So now we need a motion for our minutes.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve our minutes of January 7th, but I would change the date to 2025.
Very good.
Is it wrong everywhere?
Is it wrong in the minutes?
I didn't even notice that.
I'm sorry.
We were close.
Is it wrong on there too? Okay. Thank you for that. I
I'll look right
apologize.
at it. I need a second.
Second?
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion
So
passes.
can we sign that? Can you mark it off?
You can sign, yes, because that's why I always print them, not back to back. So you can have the signature page and I will change the front page, which I think is the only place that. Can't do it all the time on there.
Yeah.
Just like, don't
Sign it,
give
yeah.
original.
Thank her. All right, so we'll go to our miscellaneous items.
I will change
That,
it.
please.
Oh, sure, here you go.
It
Go right
does
ahead.
say approve this day of the,
What?
does this, the,
Oh, can't
at
do
the
it.
bottom?
Nope,
Is
it's
that
not.
date wrong
Do
too?
you have a date on that?
I'm sure it does.
It should say on the bottom.
Oh, no, you're good.
Is that
That one says 2025?
That one says 25.
Yeah, you're good there.
Okay.
But it says the fourth day, is that right? It's the fourth day? No,
Yes.
this, wait a
Today's the
minute,
fourth.
that's today.
Oh, am I signing? No, I can't see his signature.
Yeah, that's the approval date.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay.
Yeah, we're good.
Yeah, okay, that's good.
That's
Okay,
the right year.
that's the right
Yeah,
year.
That's the right year for
Right
that.
year, right date.
Your minutes are,
Top page stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah.
okay. So your motion, approve the minutes with an amendment or correction.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you for that. We're just making sure you're paying attention. Sorry. All right. Next meeting date? So I think I heard back from most of you, and we were here for our meeting earlier. I think it was pretty universal not to have a meeting on March
Fifth.
4th.
Fifth.
March 4th,
Yeah,
which is election day.
Yeah.
As you heard from folks tonight, they're gonna move forward with this map very fast, whether we keep up with them or not. So I would recommend a February 18th meeting, with no meeting in March, just so we are keeping up with this map. Unless you see the map, hate the map. and want them to come back to a meeting in March, maybe at the second date in March. But you could also have them come back in April. But I would at least get a first glance at this map as soon as possible.
I agree.
Me too.
Good, you're good? Yep.
Full disclosure, I've seen the map.
Oh,
Is
Kathy.
this the same map that was shown back at the end of last year, or is it, it's different? Okay.
You don't have a poker face.
You all surprised, I must. Move on from that thought though.
Okay.
So I think you should see the map as soon as possible.
Okay.
Well, can't you send it to us before the meeting?
It'd be nice, right?
Good.
Not released.
Okay. That's because you're on this committee, so you're not allowed to.
No, it doesn't have, yeah.
You have a copy of the map now.
You'll want to see the map.
I like the idea of meeting on the 18th.
So
Seeing this
18th,
map.
Yep.
Yep.
I won't put anything else on your agenda other than that.
Okay.
So because it is the second meeting, we're just gonna do that. Does that sound okay?
Sounds fair.
Sounds good.
Bless you.
Except maybe
Huh?
we'll
Don't
quickly
get
talk
near me.
about the
Okay.
ADU stuff. We'll bring you that checkbook. Maybe that's it,
Yep.
since it's fresh in your mind.
Yep.
Okay. 18th
We'll
meeting.
noodle on 30% then?
Huh?
Bring that back, that we'll
Yeah.
noodle on the 30%?
Oh, yeah.
Noodle on your 30%.
Yeah, I'm not going to do that in the next 2 weeks, but okay.
Maybe you can come up with the clear answers, like absolutely not a detached barn.
No clear answers, that's the problem.
I know.
Okay. Energy report, sometimes we give you a full presentation. If you want one, you can have one, but.
I can read, it was fine.
Necessary. You've got a report you can read, does that seem?
I just am hoping they can do replacement with electric appliances. When they have to replace a furnace or they have to replace a hot water heater, if they would consider, replacing it with an electric appliance.
I definitely don't want to replace my hot water
Yeah.
tank with an electric.
Do you mean in the town hall?
Yeah.
In the town
Oh,
office
town
building?
hall.
Yeah.
Whew.
I can take a note on that, so
You mean in the town office
buildings.
Any
This is all
For-
electric anyways.
anything that needs to be replaced that's not electric, that uses fuel.
Or natural, we could use natural
Right,
gas.
natural gas,
I
yeah,
love that.
yeah,
Okay.
Diesel's clean, it's not like the old days.
yeah. Nuclear, I don't know, whatever.
Nuclear is clean energy.
It is clean energy.
That's right. Put a little reactor in the basement, good to
I will
go.
pass along that feedback. Anything else you'd like me to pass along? What's for town-owned buildings? Okay, anything else?
Um,
No? Okay.
Good. All right, next.
You received a notice of Vermont gas petition?
I think we should get some money back from that company. It looks like they messed up 5 times when they were putting in that gas line. And now they just, it seems, I mean, I don't understand how they mess up 5 times and then have no consequence.
Full disclosure, I put it in your packet because it was addressed to you, but
Oh, I'm just saying, I think they owe us some money, like,
But Colchester wasn't really part of
No,
where those
thought-
changes were.
I think it's because they spent so much time fighting it.
this is the one that went through Moncton?
Yeah,
We went through like 4 or 5 towns.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a battle
Yeah,
every
like
time.
Well,
But the areas
Moncton,
where those changes were made wasn't in Colchester.
It's still, doesn't it bother you though that they did that and now they just, there's no consequence for them?
I know in like a regular construction project, during construction, there are change orders because there's, unforeseen circumstances. Did you have to make changes in order to proceed? There are usually, you're taking care of problems. So I don't know that what that petition actually
I
said that
thought-
it was wrong the way it was
I
built.
thought the PUC said it was wrong.
They had to change the original
I thought the-
plans.
PUC said there was something that was wrong with it. I think, again, I don't read these at all very often, but I thought they said the objections were valid. But we can talk about it maybe
Yeah,
next
and I
time.
can give it a closer read.
Okay,
Unfortunately, I got it and put it right in your packet, so you have it, but I was working on the other items in your packet and
It's
did not
okay.
give it much attention.
Just-
That's all good, it's finished anyways. It's all done.
Yeah, I mean, it's a done deal, but,
I don't want my gas to go up anymore in pricing from fines, I'm gonna tell you right now. It's got enough taxes on it right now as it is. Natural gas, yeah, it's jumped about 20%.
Yeah, no, I have natural gas too.
I took that
Some
bus
money
because I
I
had
keep
natural
put
gas.
in.
Alright?
Every time
Alright.
my house has felt warm. It's interesting.
Yeah, because it's so cold out.
Well, baseboard radiation, natural gas, hot water, and having the thermostats on the interior and having one right next to a heating pipe just didn't work very well. One was overriding the other, so you tend to be cold. There's now two heat pumps, one on each floor, but they're on the outside wall. It kind of balances it out.
Absolutely.
It's interesting.
Wow.
All about airflow. All right,
Anyway.
need a motion for adjournment.
All right, I'm making a motion that we adjourn this meeting.
All right.
Second that one.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Adjourn, it is 9:37. Thank you.